Your Excellencies, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It is an absolute privilege to stand before you today in this remarkable venue at the National Museum of Qatar. I am profoundly honored to welcome all of you to the Geneva International Motor Show Qatar 2023, an event that transcends borders and unites minds from around the globe. As I stand here, surrounded by a diverse audience representing different nations and backgrounds, I am reminded of the extraordinary power of innovation and collaboration. Today, we come together to discuss a topic close to our hearts, the future of car design. Our lineup of speakers is nothing short of extraordinary, with experts and visionaries from the United States, Europe, and Australia. This international representation emphasizes the global significance of GIMS Qatar as a platform to connect, inspire, and help shape the future of the automotive industry. This forum is a testament to the partnership between GIMS Qatar, the Qatar Auto Museum, and Car Design News. Together, we embark on a journey that explores the bold new design direction for luxury and supercars. Expect a rich program of content, an exclusive keynote speech, thought-provoking panels discussions, and a truly immersive experience that breaks down the silos within our industry. Our exclusive keynote speaker, Frank Stephenson, has left an indelible mark on the world of car design. From his work with McLaren to his influential online presence, Frank has pushed the boundaries of automotive creativity. His insights today will surely inspire us all. Throughout the day, we will delve into topics such as rethinking luxury and the future of supercars. These discussions will address the changing landscape of consumers' desires, the impact of new technology, and the evolution of powertrains, all with the aim of shaping the future of automotive. And to add a touch of intrigue, we have an exclusive preview in store for you, a revelation from the Qatar Auto Museum and Visu Arts Qatar. We will explore the mysteries behind this creation with Marcia Gandini, daughter of the legendary Marcello Gandini, and other distinguished panelists. As we move forward, let us not forget the beautiful surroundings of the National Museum of Qatar, a place where history meets innovation, a fitting backdrop for our discussions on the future. Thank you for joining us today. Let's embark on this journey together, connecting, inspiring, and shaping the future of car design. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone, thank you so much for coming. I feel like the first thing I should do is apologise for my awful picture. It was taken in my office back in London at the last moment, but never mind. So, welcome. I'm the editor of Car Design News, James McLaughlin, and I'm here to be your host for today. Predictions are a risky business, they really are. We've all seen documentaries or movies 20 years ago predicting that we were going to be in flying pods by now. That hasn't happened, clearly, although that future may be hovering just over the horizon. But we are here to discuss what the future might look like. To quote my famous countryman, Paul Gascoigne, I don't make predictions and I never will. But we have assembled some top automotive minds from the world of design to give us their take on the visions of what might be coming in the next 20 years. Everything, as Sandro said, from supercars to the ideas of luxury, and of course we've got a very special guest a bit later who's going to beam in. But first of all, I'm going to introduce our keynote speaker, Frank Stephenson. Sandra has already done a very good job of introducing him, so I'm going to leave it to Frank to take it away. Thank you, Frank.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you guys very much, appreciated. And first of all, a very big welcome to all my esteemed colleagues and all the guests here today. It's always a nervous moment when you stand up in front of a crowd where everybody's interested in the things that we do as designers. We are very, very lucky people in this profession to be able to still be children as we grow up. We have to have an immense capacity to be creative and to be curious. Regretfully, I think as we grow older, we lose a little bit of this essence of curiosity. We become too serious, become a little bit less optimistic, and the world just doesn't seem like a very good place to be now or even in the future. So I think we have not only an opportunity, but a responsibility as designers to create a world, a future world for everybody that doesn't seem so negative like it's being portrayed a lot of times in, say, science fiction films or in books that predict catastrophic events happening because of climate change and such. So if you rely on that as your source of information about where we will be in 30 years, 2050 or so, you might just be happy that you're not going to be living in the future. But in my case, I am an eternal optimist. I look at the future with big eyes like a child, and I see a future that actually I can influence, or us as designers can have a real impact on the future for the next generations, which is obviously quite important. Every generation wants to leave the world in a much better place than we've been, and there's no reason why we can't do that. It's a sad situation in the moment in the world where there's so much violence, so much differences in economy in different countries. There's so much negative views on education, on technology, on stopping risk and all these things. So that really is a shift, I think, that we need to make in the future in terms of big step changes to get to where we envision the future to be. Now, my topic today is going to be about the car in 2050 and beyond, of course, but please don't expect me to sit here and tell you what cars are going to look like in the future. I have zero idea. I have an impression or a vision, what I would like it to be like, but if we look back in the history, say 30 years ago, say in the 1990s, and we look forward, we missed the target. And it's natural, you cannot really predict what new technology will be coming to the world in the next decade or the next few decades. For sure, it's going to be an exciting future, but it will be what we today envision. That is the purpose of design and of designers, is to envision the future and to steer towards it. So as a very quick introduction, my name is Frank Stephenson. I've been designing cars for a long time. It seems like the only thing I've ever done in my life. I've done other things, of course, but my life is really based around design since I can remember as a child, with no real knowledge of that they will actually pay you to draw a car, and they pay you well, but of course the first designers don't know that until they get through their career, that it's actually a dream profession. It really is a dream profession. Any young person in the world today, if they're at all creative and they want to be a designer, they should actually be pushed into this profession because, of course, like anything, it's a backstabbing profession. Sometimes you have colleagues who try to stop you along the way. You have conflicts. You have immense challenges to overcome. But that's what makes life interesting. It's definitely not the smoothest ride as you move from lower positions to a higher position, but you have to stay obviously true to your values and your standards. But that is what basically gets you to a good position in life and a lot of satisfaction involved in it. I've had quite a bit of satisfaction in my life. Let's see.
Hi, welcome back. Hi, welcome back.
Welcome back. Welcome back, guys.
Welcome back.
lot of these cars here and products that you see there are things that I'm doing currently, but there is, let's say, 3 decades of design behind me in my history. I'm not retired by any means at all. Actually, my life has gotten a lot more busy than I've ever been. These currently are projects that I've been involved with. I just want to pull out a few of them just to highlight from the mid-'80s towards the late 80s until about 2017 with McLaren. So I've been involved with Ford at the beginning of my career in Germany. Then I moved to BMW. And then I moved after 11 years to Italy to work with Ferrari and Maserati. And then I moved to the headquarters, the owners of Ferrari and Maserati, which is Fiat. And I worked in Turin for many years. And then obviously the opportunity to work with a brand new car or automotive arm or brand called McLaren Automotive, separate from the Formula One. And I worked there for the next decade. One car that I would like just to pull out, I mean, there are many, many stories about all of these vehicles. Design stories are the funnest things to hear about because, like I said, 3 years typically on each car. Many things happened during those 3 years of development that you could write a book on. Maybe the one I want to just point out simply because Marcia is here, is the X5, the BMW X5. This, obviously, we know the X5 today is probably one of the more successful types of vehicles, SUV vehicles, that most families would buy if they have a choice to buy one vehicle in their family. The SUV is typically today considered one of the vehicles that will pretty much do everything you need it to do. But at the time when this car was being thought about, 1994, BMW had just bought Rover Group. And with buying Rover Group, they had the opportunity to acquire MG, Rover, Land Rover, and Mini from this brand, Umbrella. So the marketing team was thinking, should we continue to build an or should we actually start to re-engineer the Land Rover and create a BMW version of it? And marketing said it was a good idea, so the engineering director asked Chris Bengal, my boss at the time, to come up with a possible option for this segment, BMW, in 6 weeks. And Chris Bengal said, of course, we'll put up a sketch program and return and show it to you in 6 weeks. Dr. Reitzler, the head of engineering at BMW, said, no, in 6 weeks I want to see the actual car, the actual prototype in full size. And if you know about car design, it is pretty much impossible to design and build full-size a proposal in 6 weeks to present it to the board. So Chris Bengal, very, very, very smart design director and designer, said, I know a company in Turin, Italy, that can build the car for us in 6 weeks. They work 24/7. In Germany, we can't do that, obviously, because in 6 weeks, you would have to work on the weekends. The unions in Germany would not allow you to work on the weekends. So the only way, again, was to go to Italy and work in a satellite studio that could build it for us. And Chris put me on an airplane on a Sunday to fly from Munich to Turin. In that time, he said, you'll have time to design the car on the airplane. And when you arrive on Sunday, you can start work immediately and come back in 6 weeks with a full size. So it seemed rather difficult, but it was what happened. I landed on Sunday afternoon at the airport in Turin. The translator took me to an industrial site outside of Turin. And we pulled up to a small hole-in-the-wall garage. He lifted the gate, and inside were 3 old men, old, 70, 75 years old perhaps, all dressed like workers, smoking their little Italian cigarettes, drinking their little espressos. And I looked at the translator, I said, how are these guys going to be working 24/7 for 6 weeks? They're pretty old. He says, do not worry about the quality of the 3 people you're working with. They are the original modelers, sculptors of the Lamborghini Miura. So when they were in their 20s, late 20s, they worked with your father, Marcello, and they produced the full-size models of the Miura. So I was actually standing in front of Da Vinci, Rembrandt, and Picasso of car design there. So they did a fantastic job, and I'm very grateful. Obviously, the X5 took off very quickly, and it's become sort of the starter of the trend of SUVs. And ever since then, probably a very successful market for every company in the world. Again, lots of stories that I could get into, but that would take all the time. So I just want to get into a little bit of what I'm doing currently, just to update a little bit why I'm so busy at the moment. I've moved into the profession of flying taxis, so a little bit to do with cars, but it's actually in the air. Within the next 2 years, you will be able to fly in this type of vehicle. It's an electric vertical takeoff and landing jet, which means it will take off vertically from most destinations like hotel rooftops, tops of the aircraft terminals or airport terminals, parks, vertiports within the city, perhaps even on vertiports located in rivers next to the city. But it will give you a very, very short first mile access to perhaps 30 minutes of travel at 300 kilometers per hour at a height of about 1,000 meters. Electric, silent, big windows, comfortable, extremely safe, safer than a commercial aircraft. They have to be because they fly into the city. And again, very comfortable. And most of all, accessible in terms of price for just about everybody. The price is calculated when the plane is full with perhaps 5 or 7 passengers to the price to be equivalent to that of an Uber taxi. So everybody can use it. So the interiors are very much like what you see here. The pilots are, of course, one of the elements that we consider to be a point of failure or hazardous. So the pilots will probably not be able to do very much except just make sure that the passengers don't freak out, that there's actually somebody in front controlling. But the planes basically just lift off, go straight, high speed, low level, electric, silent, and land. So there's no left turn, right turn, or anything like that. So it's going to be an amazingly efficient way of traveling. I worked first on the Lilium project, which was the first one you saw. The next one I did a few years ago was Archer. This is their first prototype. It's a smaller 2-seater version. Same purpose, same type of technology. This one uses blades instead of ducted fans like you saw in the original one, but still very silent and very safe. And then we also have currently what I'm working on at the moment is Autoflight, which is a German-Chinese consortium. And this one is the best one yet. It might look a little bit strange, but you can fit 5 people, so 2 in the back on a sort of sofa, 2 seats in the middle and 1 in the front. At the moment, like I said, the pilot is sitting there, but as we progress through the first 2 years, the pilot seat actually is not necessary for the pilot, but for another passenger. Range is obviously a problem because of the current battery technology, but that will improve as we move forward with solid-state batteries, more energy-dense battery technology. But all of these things are actually not possible. I know it sounds like science fiction. I can actually show you a video of how these actually operate. We are deep, deep, deep into testing at the moment. So these are actually flying. It's not hypothetical. We should achieve certification from EASA, which is the European Air Safety Administration, next year, as well as the Federal Aviation Administration in the US. So it's a worldwide product. All the big cities in the world will have these. They're operated by operators, not by private individuals. And it seems a little bit like the Jetsons, if you know this cartoon, where you have people flying above cities and going from one short destination to another. But in fact, it's not science fiction, it is reality. And the only way we can actually achieve this is when things happen at the same time around the world, the knowledge is starting to accumulate in certain technologies. The people who are sort of the trend, or the startups, not the trendsetters, but the startups, start to have the same idea. And that's why there's about 5 or 6 or 7 even big players in this industry that you probably don't know about, but in different parts of the world, each one of these companies is developing their type of aircraft. It's a little bit like the beginning of the automotive sector, where at the beginning, different companies had pretty much the same ideas. They had different ways of executing them, but the ideas are coming together to get this actually started. And if we look back in terms of how we thought in the past what the future would look like, we were, again, very optimistic. You can see these people are very happy-looking people. Even if you look back to the 50s or even to the late 40s, people were thinking about autonomous driving, where the car is more of a tool, not a tool, but an entertainment center, where you don't have to even feel like you're responsible for the car. The car stays in its lane. It does all the driving for it. You are interacting with your family, not worried about anything except being together and being socially active with the trip, during the trip. Up on the top, these ideas are amazingly futuristic for the time when they were developed, different ways of mobility within the cities, lots of experiments, lots of thinking about the future ways of travel, deliveries. Today we have Deliveroo, for example, or different ways of ordering our food, but they were already thinking of delivery systems to bring things to your home. If we look towards this here, the reason why I'm showing this picture is not to advertise that this is what I looked like when I was younger, but this is 1985. I was still a student. I was in California studying at the Art Center College of Design, and I was very fortunate to get an internship at General Motors in the Cadillac studio. And in the Cadillac studio, I was going to be there for 5 weeks. They said, give us your vision of the 1994 Cadillac. So I had to envision 9 years ahead into the future what a Cadillac would look like. And this was my vision for 1994 Cadillac, Eldorado. And still, the cars don't even look like this today. This is a little bit more futuristic. If we saw this on the road today, we would probably be shocked. But it's to show you that as a designer, we're rarely getting it right with our predictions of the future. We're very hopeful, like I said, we're very optimistic, but we miss the target all the time. That's why I'm saying to think 30 years into the future, we can envision it, but will it be reality? Probably not. And of course, we have that opportunity as designers to make it real. So it's going to be definitely a challenge to make what we envision a reality. This is what we thought of in the 1990s as being the future in 2020. Nothing like this exists where you can actually change the wheelbase of your vehicles to maybe place it into a parking position easier. This doesn't exist. It's what we were thinking about back then, but we missed the target. One of our esteemed speakers today, Daniel, was the designer back in the day, 1985, I believe he said. He designed the interior of this vehicle on the top. I'm sure he can tell you that it probably never came into production, which it certainly doesn't. But you can see these were the visions of cars for today. We're nowhere near anything like this. Close, but nowhere near, I would say. Then, of course, even the sports car manufacturers, Porsche, as traditional as they seem to be with their designs, they're always thinking, of course, on future directions, future brand strategy, potential new segments and things. But we're not there. And this is actually also an ideation of where we thought we would be in the future, say in 2030, 2040 perhaps. This is obviously from a science fiction film. I'm sure you might recognize it. But that for me is chaos, and that is not a world I would like to live in. That seems totally out of control. If you look at the eVTOL, that is something that we thought about not too long ago, but it's definitely coming. This is electricity coming from the wall. We have things like that now where you don't actually have to plug in your apparatuses. Computer technology, it was once a dream to have a self-computer, not your standard large room-sized computer. Online shopping, these were ideas back then that seemed impossible, but were visions of the designers. Doing your accounting, receiving your bills and things through the computer. Back then, impossible, but visions were already in place. The thing about here is, I think as designers, we don't have to look at, or we should not just look at cars, but at the big picture. How we solve the car, the transport, or the mobility issues that we currently have. How do we solve those for 2050? And of course, that's going to be dependent on what architecture, what living standards, what sociology or social events happen that create the cities that we will be living in. This is what we would love to be living in, I think. Lots of greenery, even though we have sort of dense living cities or environments, we still want to feel connected, obviously, to a more natural world, still technical, still very advanced. But we have to have an element, I think, in the future that we feel like we're less damaging to the environment. You don't see a lot of transport vehicles moving through this environment. That obviously needs to be controlled. But it's, like I said, the full picture that we have to envision as designers. We need to look at ways, perhaps, that make traveling from A to B or A to Z, perhaps, as a much more useful use of our time, not just being in a vehicle just to get to someplace, but using that time, which is always a luxury for all of us, even today, in a much more useful way. Then even if you're in the city, for example, do you want to use your own vehicle? Why do you want to use your own vehicle? Perhaps for privacy, but the vehicles of the future for mass transport should be able to, I think, replace that need to use your own vehicle. If we can make these as luxurious, perhaps as privately used or as convenient as using your own vehicle, mass transport in a vehicle like this would actually be a pleasure. Then, of course, if we're going sort of a bit longer distances, the best way is to be very, very efficient, of course, with the travel methods. Speed is an element that we all need or want, so we have to develop systems. We have to think a little bit differently of how we can go faster than we do today in a lot more pleasurable environment. So space is very important as well. We as humans don't like to be very tight in enclosed spaces. You need that feeling of light, freedom, and comfort. Then, of course, the next introduction, I think, big introduction, perhaps in segments, automotive segments, because we're always thinking, what new segment have we not really achieved yet, is personal mobility. How do we get to places without taking perhaps mass transport or getting into our own vehicles? So I think young designers today perhaps should start thinking about individual, not one person, perhaps two people at the very least, but ways to get moving from one place to another in a very much more natural, environmentally friendly way. It can be an exciting direction in the future. You might think, yes, but not in my lifetime. Why not? Then, of course, we're looking at short-term travel, or short-distance travel, short trips, hops, and this image may be a little bit misleading. It was funny when we put it up because we thought, what are these people actually doing? They're standing there, nobody is looking at the vehicle. Not all those people can actually fit into that aircraft there. So it's a bit of an artistic license or impression to put something like that on there. But the vehicle is very interesting. If you can imagine you and a partner or just yourself perhaps needing to fly somewhere, these are the type of landing spots, landing zones, landing ports that will be available in the future within the cities to go from one close destination to another. Now, one of the other big things that we know that is being developed currently is called the Hyperloop system. So there are different ideations behind how it could work. Again, this is a very hypothetical image, not very true. In fact, the system is correct. It works within a vacuum tube. You can achieve very, very high speeds due to very little friction or aero friction. But the fact is, these are faster than airplanes. They're located on the ground. And the problem here is that you would not ever achieve a curve that tight, a radius curve that tight. You would probably be slammed against the side of the cabin at about 10 G. So we have to think that these will actually, when produced, be very straight lines to travel at such high speeds. And the problem with that is not only the cost of the infrastructure, it would be extremely expensive to build this type of system. They're planning on doing it. It's not the negative side of it. The most negative side of Hyperloop, if you build it in this manner, is that we will probably be crossing countries through very protected areas. You would need to build them outside the cities mostly to go from, say, Paris to Geneva or places like that. And the straightness of the line would probably be bad impact on the environment. So it would be very difficult to achieve a lot of systems that cross Europe or across the world in different ways like this. But it is doable, and it is environmentally friendly, and it is a viable way in the future for us to travel. This here, innovation through design, is a journey of discovery. That is so true. We, as designers, try, like I said, to envision the future. We just don't know where we're going, but we can certainly plan for it as an end goal. And the thing here with seeing the future sort of as being curious, the more we can sort of create a larger vision or depth of field means the more possibilities we can actually discover for the future of transportation. It's much like opening up your perspective, your viewpoints, getting a lot of sort of cross-industry input into different ways that at the moment don't seem possible, but opening up your vision certainly does it. As I said before, curiosity is what drives innovation. Without curiosity, we have no potential to be innovative. It's one of the most important elements of a designer is to be curious. Not to be creative, but obviously creativity is essential. But to be creative, you need to be curious, first of all. And like I said at the beginning, regretfully, as we age, we get older, we get less impressed with life, we experience so many different things, we lose this element of curiosity. And I think as a successful designer, most of the very top designers will tell you that they are still as curious about the world as when they were a child. And again, that is, I think, the essence of being a designer. Innovation is not linear. That is so true. Like I said, we cannot predict if it was linear, if technology was linear. We could say what is coming in 2050. But because every small advance that we get in technology allows us to accelerate our information, our innovation style, it means that new things will be happening all the time. If we try to look back, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, what we have today in the world would have seemed ridiculous back then. But in fact, this acceleration curve is allowing us to be innovative. We have to take advantage of that innovation in technology. Now, one thing I want to talk about, which is the hot topic, I would say at the moment, is artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence seems to be the way of the future for a lot of designers. The main thing that I would say about automotive or artificial intelligence is that is knowledge. You can learn AI, but you cannot learn creativity. That is acquired through wisdom. So anybody can basically use AI and become one of those fake it till you make it type designers. Use AI, you look like you know what you're doing, but in fact it's definitely, for me, not the future. It feels more to me like something, I would almost call it algorithmic beauty. It's beautiful, it can be beautiful, but it's not human. We've lost the touch. It's influenced by digital and not by the human touch, the human soul. So I think we have to be careful we don't use it as the main tool. Of course, AI is a great tool for designers, but it cannot be the initiation of the creative process. That has to come absolutely from the human, from the person. When I designed the Mini, which came out in 2000, it was a big, big challenge to envision what the 1959 original Mini could look like in 1999. My last desire was to do something that we would call a retro design. So what I did was I had 4 weeks to design the new Mini and 5 months to work with a team of modelers, sculptors to produce the proposal for the final deciding contest of which of all the Minis were chosen to be the new Mini. And in 1995, I remember I spent the first 4 weeks, instead of designing the new Mini, what I did was envision what would the Mini look like had it changed 10 years later. So in 1969, if they did redesign the original Mini, what could it have looked like? And there you take into account society, what people like, what legislation was asking to do. So it would be a slightly updated version of it. So I did the 69 sketch or idea design in the first week, and successfully the 79, what were the 70s all about? Safety, block here, were room efficient, not very pretty, but satisfied or more appropriate for the 1970s. Then in 1980s, we start getting into more about sportiness and nice looking cars and things like that. So obviously there's an update. And then in the last week, this was the evolution of the 89 sketch, and that became the design of the final Mini. So what I did was create a fictitious or hypothetical evolution of the original so that the new one, the 99 one, would look like the great-great-grandson of the original. In other words, not a repetition of it, but a better, stronger, faster, more capable version of its great-grandfather. And there you would see the link. It's like if you look back in your family history, you see your eyes, you see your character, manners from your ancestors, your DNA or genetics, but translated into a much newer, much more capable version of yourself. And that's why I was always a little bit rebellious when journalists were saying this is just a retro design car. It was actually an evolution of the original as it would look like today. So, but anyways, it was successful. And I always wondered, or I haven't always wondered, recently I've been wondering, what would AI, if I'd input into it, what would you see as the evolution of the original Mini? And if the AI would make it better, would make it different, would make it worse. And this image here was what I got. 1970 Mini would look like that. 2000 Mini would look like that. I was kind of happy that the human did it, not the computer did it, because it probably wouldn't be even sold that way. Perhaps it would. I'm sure everybody has the same taste, but it is an interpretation from AI, and in this sense, you can't always rely on computers to give you the best responses. They can give you responses, but they don't have, again, the wisdom of experience. And like I said, the human touch is basically the very most important part of designing cars, any product actually, but it's the human touch I think that is the most important. We're moving into an era right now in the future where we are being influenced by a lot of governments, a lot of policies from people who want us to move to electric vehicles, electric-powered vehicles. Most of you who know about the industry probably would agree with me if I told you that electric is really not the solution to the future of our cars. Electric is not clean, as they say it is. It's a stopgap formula, in my view. It allows us to move away from petroleum and oil products, perhaps, but it is not clean until we find a way to produce cleaner energy. If we steer towards electrics, that's fine. It's, like I said, just a temporary solution. But for me, I think, and I was speaking with Dan earlier, the future, and I think we both agree, should still be combustion or can be combustion, just with much cleaner fuels. We'll probably be bringing out, I would almost venture to say that in 2027, 2028, the option of synthetic fuels will come to us. Synthetic fuels are a very clean type of energy. We can produce it with very low emissions, as well as hydrogen. There's no reason. It's very expensive currently for everybody, for the masses, but hydrogen is also a very clean way to travel. Now, if you actually look back in the history to learn back, you have to look back to not repeat mistakes. But in terms of looking back, electric was actually going to be the future of the car. This is taken in the earliest part of the century. Electric cars were powered by electricity. It was going to be the system that we powered cars by. Of course, it wasn't profitable for the big companies. Oil was a much more profitable way to propel the cars, so we moved to electrics. But looking at this image here, which was taken back then, if you look at this map here, what's really interesting for me is this is Manhattan, downtown New York, in 1924. This is showing all the charge points where you could charge up your electric vehicle in 1924. It's absolutely amazing. It's mind-blowing because I thought electric, okay, you'll have the range anxiety and all these problems, but the history showed us that basically we were going originally in this direction. We turned away, not because we were smart, but because we were driven by profits. Now, advancing technology obviously is going to help us move into the future. We're looking always at the newer materials. Luxury will not be luxury in 2050, or luxury as we see it today will not be the wood, will not be the leather that we're looking at today, it will not be the super expensive, innovative, very type of composites that we're looking at, or alloys. It'll probably move in a much more sustainable direction. I could get into that subject for a lot because I find it extremely interesting that we as a generation appreciate luxury for what we know. This room is super luxurious, but perhaps in 2050, the idea of the new younger generations will be that luxury is about sustainability, of not bringing harm to the environment, and by actually modifying the type of approach that we use for luxurious materials. This is important because the car, can it become a usable multiple tool on wheels? We've already seen it perhaps in cell phones and mobile phones. We've gone from the cell phone being just an apparatus to call while you're away from any other system. And it's extremely useful, of course, but now it's become sort of our guide to get through the day, to control everything that we need about our lives, to wake us up in the morning, to take pictures, to take videos, to record things. Amazing tool, but that is probably the destination I think that cars will head towards in the future, where cars actually begin to become tools, pleasurable tools, of course, not in the industrial sense of using it to produce something, but actually a way of enriching your life, making your life a lot more pleasurable, a lot more useful of your time. The next thing is about fully connected ecosystem. I think the only way we're actually going to move forward is if we bring all the vehicles together in terms of technology. So at the moment, basically cars are individual products. They don't speak to each other. At least the current direction is that they don't speak to each other. We need to develop an ecosystem where the cars speak to each other, which I'll show you in a moment, but also they interact with each other and they become a much more responsible system of transportation in our ecosystem, in our environment. Super, super big topic for me. Again, I wish I had an hour to speak about this, but nature for me is the most intelligent designer that we've ever had. We can say it's nature. There are a lot of spiritual beliefs behind this, which I agree to, by the way, but nature does not do bad design. Design from nature is all about efficiency. The result of the efficiency is the beauty. So form follows function is the last thing I believe in. Form is function. Any product that functions well looks amazing. Look in nature. There's very few things in nature that don't look attractive. I can't tell you any. Everything in nature is absolutely stunning to look at for me. It can still look violent, but it has a beauty to it, inherent beauty. There's a reason for that, but this is one of the patterns in nature that I think is very important for the future of mobility, and it's what we call murmuration. Fish do it, birds do it, but they're all interconnected, and this is the way of the future, I think. If we want to be more efficient, it's not reducing perhaps traffic on the road, or it's not anything so much about road density. These are very dense objects in the air in terms of volume, but they're talking to each other, they're interconnected, and you're moving at a very fast pace. You're not having any communication, interaction problems or anything like that. We still don't understand 100% how it works, but at least technology is leading in this direction where cars will be able to speak to each other. We cannot really have a smart car interacting with a stupid car. The stupid car will always cause the accident. But if we can create perhaps lanes, and we've thought about this for many, many years, lanes where only the smart technology is allowed, progressively the stupid cars and the dumb cars become smart cars, and we can increase traffic flow patterns and efficiency of moving between one place and another. So that is going to be probably one of the big areas in the future for young students in STEM subjects to understand is how we can apply these factors in nature to improving our mobility in the future on dense areas. It's not about reducing the density, it's about improving the flow patterns. So when I say natural efficiency, of course, the McLaren P1 is a great example of that, because when I started with McLaren, we had no past design language, no history in design. One car, the McLaren F1, but it was like too far back in the history of McLaren to be the building block for the rest of the future of McLaren Automotive. So we basically started from scratch with the design of, especially the McLaren P1, which was let's call it the calling card of McLaren, of what McLaren was capable of doing with unlimited budget, not unlimited budget, of course, but high budget and total freedom to design a car. So as they often say, cars all look the same today, or they have the same solutions. With the McLaren P1, we approached it from a completely different angle of design. We took the hard points, which are where the passenger seat sits, where the engine is placed, the wheelbase, the suspension hard points. These are all points that, as designers, we're kind of not allowed to modify. It's given to us by engineering as the basis, as the skeleton of our design. We have to put a nice shape that works, and every company has their interpretation of what works or what is needed. McLaren is all about high performance. So in effect, the way we approached, or the way I thought we should approach the P1, was to design for speed and lightness. Heavy or weight is the enemy when we design fast cars. So if I looked in nature, the fastest fish in the sea is the sailfish, the Atlantic sailfish. There are two types of sailfish. And the reason why the Atlantic sailfish is so fast is down to very, very small details that you can only really get to understand if you analyze it. So I bought a sailfish when I first arrived at McLaren in Miami. I was near Miami. I bought a live cell, well, live, it was dead after they caught it. We had it sent back to McLaren. I used my company credit card. The finance director wanted to fire me, but we got it in. We tested it through the aerodynamic methods we use, which are not so much in the wind tunnel. We have different systems of testing for aerodynamics. And we found out why the fish was so fast. And I could go into, like I said, a lot of detail, but obviously the scales produce micro bubbles, creates basically a sheath of air around the fish, accelerates the fish. There are a lot of different bumps and little things on the tails that help it. All of these things were applied to the McLaren P1. If you ever see a P1 and you want to understand why it's so fast, put your arm, not your hand, your arm into the main side intake, just below the window, and put your hand inside. You will start to feel a very interesting surface. It's not just a smooth surface of air going into the engine. It's got a very funny feeling surface. It's the scales, the outside skin of the fish that have been actually milled, put into the intake area to accelerate the air. A lot of different little tricks, but that is the influence that we can get from nature. The car is not futuristic at all. It still looks very good after 15 years in the market about. It looks very futuristic, but futuristic is only because it's a natural, timeless design. The fish doesn't look old. It's going to look great in 50 years. Same principle of that theory is applied to the McLaren P1, and that's why it probably still looks timeless today. And of course, if you see the car rotating, I hope, there are solutions on here that perhaps look attractive, but it's down to the fact that we tried to remove as much material from the body as possible. It's very skin, what we call shrink wrapped. There's no excess material like on a Ferrari, for example, which is very sensually designed. On the P1, we tried to basically shrink wrap it and reduce weight from the vehicle. So a lot of the influence of nature was involved in the design of it. I'll skip through that. Now, again, what I said with earlier is we can, to design for the future of automobiles, I think we have to think more in terms, less in terms of what looks beautiful or what customers may want, but how it actually works with society in general. The new generation of children that are growing up today that will be around in 2050 when we are old people will not have the same tastes that we will have. They'll appreciate more thought to the environment, more thought to the planet. This type of thinking, this type of radical, divergent thinking is going to produce different solutions than what we see today. So all of this, which might look, I wouldn't say old or new, just timeless, is going to be a lot more attractive to the generation of young buyers, of young customers that are coming into the next generations of being customers for mobility. So of course, you have things like the skyscrapers today, but I can see a trend, more than a trend, a shift in our mentality to moving more towards being with nature. And I've always believed this is very, very important, that great design, not just good design, but great design is when you have something that is working super efficiently, super well resolved, as we call it. It's not simple in the sense of boring or simplistic. It's incredibly hard to achieve simple design. You have to reduce, reduce, reduce. But that is, again, the secret, I think, to good design. Not over-design, not over the top and trying to make a huge statement. That is super trendy. That's in next year and out the next year. But for good design that makes an impact on society, we have to look at the simplest solutions. The Mini in 1959, the reason why it became iconic was because it was not designed by a designer, it was engineered. It was engineered to be space efficient, almost bigger inside than outside. And we were able to carry a large, or say 4 people with luggage within a very, very compact space due to the engineering innovation that it brought. So that car, as a principle, was very good in terms of innovation, and the design was a result of that, as well as the original Jaguar E-Type, for me, probably the most beautiful car in the world. But again, not designed. It was designed or engineered by a gentleman called Malcolm Sayer, who was an aerodynamicist, and he tried to achieve a very fluid shape, very efficient shape, and this was the result of it, which, again, probably one of the most stunning looking cars in the world. Then if you look at the efficiency of the design of the Concorde for speed, the result is something that still stays in our mind. Everybody recognizes it, but it is one of the most powerful aircraft designs that we can ever keep in memory. So again, beauty is something that we see it, of course, but it's emotional, and emotion is the big secret in design. All the products we design in the future have to touch what we say the five senses. We have to feel it, we have to sense it, we have to feel, I guess, from our gut that it's right. That is very hard to achieve. The main other point I want to bring up is that good design has to bring great value to the world. Design for design's sake is the worst thing we can do. There's no reason for that. There are enough great products in the world. We need to design for bringing ourselves back in tune with nature. We have to reduce stress. We have to make commuting enjoyable. We don't want to live in a world like this. We're harming, stressing, not being comfortable, not being happy. The future is a little bit more intelligent, I would hope, than what we're seeing here. This image here basically shows you the slow movement we have today, the reason why we need to get out of this way of thinking. We have to become a lot more efficient in terms of transport. Perhaps, like I mentioned before, personal transport might be something like this that we're looking at. Might seem bizarre to you, but definitely it's very possible to create vehicles like this in the future. We're getting there now. We're already in the air. We're doing our personal transport, environmentally friendly transport. So this is potentially another way that not only is perhaps aviation style, but replacing the way we think of cars in the future. Maybe a car can be on the road and do what you see it doing here. So if we can't describe a new destination, we will never get there. The important thing is for visions to come from the designers of how we will get there. Design beyond Earth is the next step for the young designers of today. We will have to think of when we do get out of our environment here, how do we move things further along when we get to sort of destinations that are, for example, on the moon. We want to transport people on the surface. We need products like this. So the car designers of tomorrow may be thinking of not just cars on Earth, but cars on the moon, for example, excursions and things like that. So briefly, this is just a video of the current project we're working on that will take people to near space. It's a space capsule. I don't want to get into too much, but you can see that it actually exists. This will take people to space for 6 hours and allow them to have an incredible over-effective view of Earth for a tenth of the price of what it costs now currently for 40 minutes on SpaceX or on Virgin Galactica. So this is going to be something coming next year to the market. We're already involved with it. And again, main goal is for the wow factor for the young generation to have when they see things that we are bringing as designers to the world of transportation and mobility. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Frank. That was wonderful. It's nice to see some old Tomorrow's World footage mixed in as well with some of the more utopian visions of the future. And also the fact that a reminder, I think, that we used to dream big in the 50s and 60s, and maybe we need to recapture some of that spirit today. Anyway, on to the next discussion, which is about supercars. Electrification has changed the way we view cars. It's created new forms and aesthetics. Oh, there's some music coming on, sorry. And we've got a lovely panel to discuss how that future may unfurl. What is in the context of a supercar in the future, when there's no engines, what does that mean? That used to be the power, the thrust of the engine gave you that emotive feel. In an electric world, will we still be able to capture some of that emotion? There are many, many different points we can go through, but to help me discuss these points are our panelists, which are Guy Burgoyne, who's 30 years in the industry, he's taken them all over the world, China, Sweden, Australia, France. Dan Duranko, who's the VP of Design at Chantu, and he was also 25 years at General Motors. Welcome, Dan. 10 years at General Motors, maybe. And finally, Sasha Selipanov, who was a former design director at Koenigsegg and now has just launched his own studio, Hardline 27, which we look forward to seeing some of the work coming out of there very shortly. Welcome, gentlemen. I'm just going to take a seat. How it's going to work is each of the guys are going to give you a short presentation, and then we're going to have a discussion, and then I'd love to have some questions from you, the audience, so don't be shy. When the opportunity arrives, we're going to have some roving mics going around. But I think first up, Sasha, is you, your presentation. Please, either you're going to sit? Good. Okay.
Yeah, I'll sit. Hi, everyone. Sasha Selipanov is my name. First of all, thank you very much for being here, and thank you, Frank, for a very inspiring speech. Very interesting and a lot of fresh new ideas that propel the industry forward. I'm going to take a slightly different angle with my presentation. First of all, because we're focusing on sports cars, hypercars, supercars, a field which I'm intimately familiar with. I had a very fruitful career, 20 years in the industry. My experiences range from Lamborghini, where I was involved in the design of the Huracan, to leadership roles at Bugatti, where I was head of exterior in charge of the Chiron exterior development, as well as the Atlantique, that unfortunately was never produced, Vision Gran Turismo. Moving on to my time at Genesis, where I was responsible for advanced design, built up a team of designers where we did the Essentia concept, and then I was head of design at Koenigsegg, which was my dream job from very early age, and I had a chance to lead the design development of the Gemera, the first four-seat mega car, and the CC850, which was just shown last year. I left Koenigsegg about a year ago to start my own design consultancy, together with a few dear friends and ex-colleagues. I'll get back to that point a little bit later. But we're here to speak about hypercars and supercars, and it's, like I said, a subject that is very dear to my heart. I personally really like extreme experiences. I like extreme music. I like things that deliver a Neanderthal punch to the gut. That's how I see my taste in music and in cars. I like things that are raw. I like things that are extreme. I like things that challenge our senses to the maximum, sometimes in a dangerous way. I don't intend on killing anyone, but I think that it should be an experience when you drive these cars. It should really shake you to the core. It should challenge you in every conceivable way. And the inspiration I take comes from racing, from the early days. I was at the Grand Prix yesterday. It was an exciting event. I loved it. But I feel like the golden age of racing are somehow behind us at the moment. When I see videos of Ayrton Senna in Monaco, working his throttle, the way he kind of pilots the car around those streets feels incredibly thrilling and dangerous. The sliding, the way Gilles Villeneuve was able to control his cars on oversteer, this is what inspires me. This is what takes, what brings me this Neanderthal punch to the gut. This is what I try to capture in the work that I do and that I'm inspired by. Today, the hypercar scene is very, very rich. It's flourishing. We have so many cars on the market, probably the biggest selection of hypercars that have ever existed, and a huge following. I had the opportunity to be in Pebble Beach this year and to speak at the Exotics on Broadway, and there's just a huge following. There's an incredible amount of fans, an incredible amount of passionate car people around this world, and they're all captivated by this sense of extreme experience, by this sense of brutality, which in a way is being desensitized by modern technology. If we think about what modern technology brings and what electrification has brought to the table and what driving assists have brought to the table, it's a watering down of this violent experience which we all cherish in the sports car. So I think that if we try to boil down what hypercars are about or what supercars are about, it's these things that I've listed here. It's passion, it's status, it's the smell and the sound, it's the thrill, it's the beauty. There's the top speed, there's the investment factor, there's the inner child factor. Some of these things are at odds with each other. Like, for example, we try to awaken an inner child within our customer. We try to make them decide on impulse, decide on love, decide on passion, but they need to justify that investment. They need to understand that the product that they purchase will not be a bad one for them, in the long term. These are very expensive vehicles. So these are the parameters that we need to think about. And probably the primary three, at least in the past, were acceleration, lap time, and top speed. These are the things that defined hypercars until right now. But today the landscape is changing. At least in one of those categories, we have a vehicle setting standards, which is electric, and it's incredibly fast. If you think about top speed, we have Koenigsegg Jesko Absolute, which I personally also worked on, aiming at top speeds far above 500 kilometers per hour. The Aston Martin Valkyrie, under braking and full load going into a corner, is above 4G, cornering alone is 3.5 G. So we are at numbers today that are not really challengeable anymore. Human body will not be able to withstand and enjoy going more extreme than this. So what do we do to deliver the next step, especially considering the fact that this level of performance is accessible at a relatively low price point? How do we deliver a vehicle that is the ultimate when you can have acceleration like what Tesla is doing right now for a fraction of the price? We have to focus on the other stuff as well. That's the reason why we have to focus on things like awakening the inner child, the passion, the status, the beauty, the joy, the smell and the sound. And what actually delivers those components? It's internal combustion engines and its design. These are the two things that really deliver on all the rest of these attributes. Obviously, internal combustion engine is a thing of huge passion for me and for a lot of the people in this sports car world. Just the pictures alone, but we also hear them, we also smell them, we also experience them in a very intimate, very personal way. For me, the best internal combustion engine sounds like a death metal band. You know, when I go to a concert, I get exactly the same feeling that I get when I go to the track. Environmental impact is a valid point, but we saw Seb Vettel drive his Williams with biofuels just a couple of years ago. In my mind, this is a valid direction for the sport, going back to natural aspirated V12s, but also for the industry. You could have no environmental impact. You could offset it by having biofuels and other clever technology to have guilt-free sound and experience. On the design side, the only thing I would like to say is these cars have to be extremely low. And if you have a battery pack under your car, it's very difficult to achieve this level of height. I listed a few vehicles here. Some of them I worked on. Others are just classics from the industry. And you can see that they're all below 1,200 millimeters high, which is roughly this. It's an incredibly important parameter. So, is this the future? Do we all go towards battery packs and Teslas, or is there something else that the industry has to deliver? I mean, battery packs and Teslas are great, and we have Apple Watches, we enjoy them, but there's also horse riding, there's also tourbillon mechanical watches, and I think that hypercar belongs in this world and not in the other. So what are we doing at Hardline? As I said, we have a great team. We're working on projects for different car manufacturers, startups, incredibly fascinating projects, most of them sports car projects. But I'm also dreaming of building this ultimate violence on wheels myself, and this is what I'm investing a lot of my time in at the moment. It's under the covers for now, but I hope I'll have something for you in the near future. So thank you very much for your attention. And
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sasha. Violence on wheels and death metal bands. You're totally on brand today, I'd say. Dan, you're next up.
I also have been working in the car industry for many years. And just like Frank Stephenson, I've been fortunate enough to merge into air vehicles, aviation solutions for transportation. And it comes back to answering the question is not how do we do a better car, but how do we move humans and commodities in a very efficient way. And it's going to take on a lot of different permutations, because now we have a lot of more tools to enable differentiation, personalization, optimization. How I got there was I was invited 15 years ago to start up a electric vehicle company in China, and the first thing that the leadership asked me was, what is the DNA of the Chinese philosophy and how does that translate into going forward? And as you see now, I mean, here in Qatar, so many Chinese vehicles, but years and years ago, they were copies or they were badly engineered and designed, but their trajectory and their acceleration curve is off the maps now. They are very much leaders in a lot of areas, electrification, autonomy, and I think that is only going to continue. And how I got there was I was given pretty much a blank sheet of paper, and which every designer wants, but sometimes it's also a huge burden to create a brand DNA, to create an ecosystem around a culture that doesn't have a history. You're reinventing, you're challenging the status quo. So our first vehicle we did was the Concept 1, which is a limousine version of a idea that the owner of a company, he would be driven during the day and he would be pampered, but at night he would actually take control of the vehicle and drive it like hell because it was his car and that was his way of decompressing. The smaller vehicle was basically the first production vehicle, which is the K20. And this became a laboratory on wheels. And I don't know if you can see, but the back light or the back glass is all polycarbonate. And what we learned from this experiment was that manufacturing techniques and fabrication techniques will allow and will compel people to have much higher level of personalization. The production version is very similar to the concept version, but it has much more sustainable footprint. The whole body is polymer. All of the bits on the interior are recyclable, and it's also being looked at more like a smartphone on wheels, because that is the future. It's an extension of your telephone will be in your mobility solution. And you might not even own this car. You might just borrow it for 10 minutes or for 2 weeks or for 3 days. And sometimes you don't want just a two-seater car because you have your friends or you have your dog or you have your kids. So the same platform easily can be manufactured and modified and stretched to accommodate more functionality. But it's the same vehicle, as you all know. This idea of taking the basic guts and chassis and modifying it to make that vehicle more user-friendly, that's the future. So I'm at the auto show, and I see all the bespoke automotive manufacturers are creating vehicles which are limited edition. 1 of 50 or 2 of 80. And the car companies are still in this whole mindset that bespoke, personalized is a very exquisite and small batch of vehicles. But my prediction is that with using AI technology and additive manufacturing, which is 3D printing, every person in this audience can have their own car, like nobody else's. And that's because I learned in China, because there's 1 billion people, that they don't want to drive the car that Sasha's driving, or Guy. They want their car to be special. So you see a lot of crazy bespoke cars that have been modified to say, this is my car. So this green car I'm showing on the screen is the same as this. Underneath, all of the mechanicals, all of the performance, all of the attributes are identical to the last car, but the body has been configured and optimized using AI and 3D printing to build every part of the car that you see uniquely and specially. And we can do this all day long. I can do 100 cars because there's 100 of you in the audience. And how cool is that, is to have your own custom suit, to have your own car, to have your own whatever. It's like going to a restaurant and say, I want the salmon with tomato sauce. That's what the car will be. It'll be totally customizable. But you might not want a two-seater. You might have a family. You might have a dog. You might have 3 people in a family. So you start to stretch and pull and to modify, to optimize your personal footprint. And sometimes you need a car for 5 people. But the idea and the methodology and the notion of a car or transportation or mobility is going to be personalized on a macro level. Just like your fingerprints are different, your car will be different because you have spec'd out every single part of that vehicle. And while you're in your vehicle, what are you going to do if the car is driving by itself? Well, you can be playing chess with your friend in another city, in another country, anywhere else, because your car is being driven by somebody else or by the cloud, and it's autonomous. So what do you do while you're being driven? A lot of stuff. You can have a food. You can do anything. Because the AR technology will allow you to interact with your vehicle like you've never been able to. And sadly, there's a lot of places in Earth that are very dangerous and becoming very critically challenged. So your vehicle now will have to protect you. It'll have to save your life. So your vehicle will have passive and active systems to get you out of harm's way, whether it's climactic or violence or upheaval. We can't escape it. It's part of our life. But using this type of technology, and if we start to branch into what's happening in the avionics world, nanotechnology, advanced aerodynamics, and aeroelastic surfaces will allow you to now have your vehicle extremely maneuverable. So by using advanced technologies, your body of the vehicle will start to morph to enable you to get out of harm's way, or to move faster, or to move into new areas that you had not thought of. I'm driving through the desert, we're going to the adventure, and I'm thinking, why are all supercars designed for Milano, or Beverly Hills, or for Rome? Supercars should be designed for the local user. If you're here in Qatar, your vehicle should have sensibilities and attributes that complement your environment. Why not? Nobody's doing this. And why do you even need a road to drive on? You've got millions of miles of sand and areas that are not accessible to your supercar. But yes, they will be if you have something like this. Who needs roads? I would actually ask every government to stop building roads. Roads are wasteful, and they trap you, and it's a tyranny of the road, because we are now going to go into 3D mobility and broadband, which is allowing people to travel anywhere, anytime, any place. But I don't want a taxi. I don't want to be driven with 6 other people. I want my own airmobile. I want something that's sporty, that's super cool, futuristic, and personalized. So that idea that you can have a personalized supercar, let's move that into the airspace. And while you're in it, you're also being driven. And you can do all the same cool stuff that you're doing in your automobile, but now you're doing it in the air. How about if you had a super hyper VTOL, which is a vertical takeoff and landing? This is just for you and your friend, or by yourself. Why does the air taxi have to be so accessible? That's my taxi. That's my airmobile. I don't want you in it. This is for me to get away and to escape. And there's also going to be a new category, which is not fully airworthy, but it'll be a hybrid. It'll be somewhere in between, kind of like a speeder. That's going to be cool. 3/4 of the world is water. So let's take that idea of mobility and move it over water and do it in ways that are super cool, super fast, and personalized. My job is to bring mobility to the sea, to the air, and to the land. We are in an amazing time to be alive and to be a designer. There's no better time. Thank you.
Just before we move on to guys, that's really interesting. I've never heard a designer say they want to stop building roads. This is the first time I've heard this, Dan. How long have you been harboring this ambition to stop road building?
Because I was stuck on a road. I was stuck on the road for an hour yesterday trying to get from the airport. I hate roads.
No.
It's a tyranny, and it's the it's a waste of time. And the most valuable thing that we have as humans is time, and time is running out. Anything we can do to get from point A to point B and do it faster is better.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Guy, your turn.
Thank you, everyone. I'll just let you on a little secret here that designers, my esteemed colleagues here, it's a great pleasure to be presenting with them. We are tortured souls. We can't help our creativity go places. And Dan's just given me a new nightmare with the thought of the customer that mixes their salmon with their tomato ketchup. I'm not going to be sleeping tonight because of that, but thank you, Dan. My presentation is going to be a little bit more, a little history lesson at the beginning and a bit of philosophy. Maybe you can give me some feedback at the end. I'm not going to show you the answers. I'm going to ask some questions. So when we got this request from the Great Car Design News people about the supercar, I thought I'd better just check my facts. So I went back and looked into a little bit of history about the total number of cars manufactured each year and how it's increased over time, and have a few blips in there for maybe a global financial crisis or COVID. And then you've got this other line here, which is, it's quite approximate, don't hold me to the numbers, which kind of represents sports cars. And my colors deliberately go a little bit more beige as you go this way, because basically things get a little bit more disparate, and companies start to offer the thing that looks like the sports car but maybe doesn't perform that way. And therefore we then get this new line for, probably in about the 60s, the term supercar came about, because there were cars that were really focusing on the performance. And human nature, we can't stand still, we have to come up with a new name. And from my point of view, in about early 1990s, we developed the hypercar. I think the McLaren F1 was seen as that first stage where they really took another leap. So today's conversation is really all about this area, the future of these sports cars, these supercars, hypercars, megacars, I think I heard there as well. I'm not sure what the next terminology will be, but... Well,
Hyper, super, mega cars.
Yeah. And, you know, of course, all children are super, aren't they? Yeah, of course, we all think that. All children are super. But what are those children seeing as aspirations for the future? What is super for them? What's their future going to be? What's the thing that's going to be the pinnacle for them, the extreme thing that they want to achieve? And it makes me think of superheroes. So my philosophy here is to give you a bit of an analogy to superheroes and supercars. Early in my career, I got to work in the place where the XJ220 was built. But to me, that kind of aligns quite nicely with this. It was all about power. It was maybe a little bit more like my physique. It was a bit big and strong. And in today's market, is maybe not seen as so appropriate, maybe not so efficient. Then we have something that Sasha worked on, part of this car, I believe, but it's all about the speed, the top-end speed. And we have superhero that reflects that. These are the traditional supercar attributes. And then you get this lovely mix of the two things that came in particular with the McLaren F1, where you've got that about the agility, mixing that power with its weight, so you get the absolute maximum performance. But then we have this issue today, don't we? And we did our presentations separately. We didn't see our presentations before we came here. But yes, here you've got this situation, you've got this egotistical billionaire, super smart, using technology. I'm talking about Tony Stark, by the way, just to be clear. And they're augmenting a normal person. They're augmenting that person and giving them super abilities. It's not a person that's been hit with gamma rays. It's not some being from another world that happens to be stronger or faster. But it's an issue, isn't it? We've suddenly got to this point of anyone can be super in this way. But in the supercar, buying a supercar, it gives you this issue. How are you going to be the extreme thing when you suddenly become open for the masses? If everyone was a superhero, then no one would be a superhero. So what do we need to do? And obviously, if we talk about this analogy, we've got to talk about Superman, Superwoman. And what's their unique thing? Of course, they fly. So, Frank, I managed to get your Lilium just flying past there. And we have other ones as well. Is this the future? Is this what super vehicles will be in the future? Will we even be saying supercar? And using this analogy, this is what designers often do. We try and philosophize about something and think about it into the future. What's the current superheroes? How are they different? Well, to start with, they're a bit more culturally diverse. That's a good thing. And their superpowers aren't necessarily those traditional ones of power, strength, speed, agility. It's maybe something else. It's maybe an art, martial art. Again, more diverse, and their superpowers are doing something different, doing something with materials and changing things. I think this is something to think about going forward, is what's going to be super. Now, my thought is the way to use this kind of Tony Stark electric technology, the technology side of things, and adding it to those superpowers that already exist. So if we take the Hulk and we wrap him in Tony Stark's suit, we get something even more. We multiply that superpower. But again, maybe this is still a bit more like the XJ220 is a bit too heavy. So maybe it's more Spider-Man receiving his suit from Tony Stark. You've all seen the movies, I know. So it's exaggerating his skills. It's taking the superpower that was already there and using the latest technology, the latest smarts around the world to amplify it. But whatever we do, it's got to be that extreme thing. It's got to give an extreme thing, a power. It's got to hit you in the stomach, or Neanderthal, what was it? Punch to the gut. Punch to the gut, thank you. And we of course, we have great technology. I don't know if you've seen this, but they basically took the whole of the Thriller video and changed Michael Jackson to Arnold Schwarzenegger. And we can do this in real time now. It's happening already. We'll be able to choose who's in Star Wars in the future. We'll be able to see the whole movie, but have Marilyn Monroe playing Princess Leia if we want to. But is this super on its own? The issue is that a lot of the technologies, when it's software-driven, can be easily repeated and given out everywhere, and therefore on its own it could be on any car. It's a great technology, but how are we going to use it going forwards? We've seen all the buildings, the lovely buildings in Doha at night, and the animations that can come on, and we've seen the example of this exterior and interior that fully envelops you and gives you the impression of being somewhere else in a full environment. Maybe we need to add this to the superpower we've already got for supercars, that strength, speed, agility. So for example, your interior of your car, the whole environment might, when you're going within the speed limit of the city, it maybe makes you feel like you're going even quicker. Or your acceleration that it has anyway, it's going to make it feel even more acceleration, even more G-force by that technology. So that's my thought for you, is that the way forwards is to get that technology and exaggerate the superpowers we already have. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Guy. Lots to unpick from all of those presentations. One of the key themes that came out as listening to you guys was this idea that how you tackle the limits of speed. I mean, we talked before, Guy, where you went full throttle in a Tesla and you almost passed out. So we are at this stage where, you know, there are limits to what the human body can withstand. And I wondered if we could speak a little bit more about that, maybe from you, Sasha, because you're the man who's most aligned to the punch in the gut, the power, and how we sort of ensure that we're now, that they're pushing the limits, you know, how we sort of make it a super experience in this new sort of landscape.
Yeah, so it's actually a very valid question, and I tried to sort of hint at the problem with the three cars that I listed out as the top performers right now, that outright speed is probably less valid going forward than it was in the past, because we're kind of reaching a theoretical limit. Like, I spent so much time with Christian Koenigsegg, and he always said that with the next world speed record, he doesn't know whether he will continue setting them going forward, because going above 500, even in controlled environment, on the surface of the Earth is really quite dangerous. And even something as stupid as an animal crossing the road or a bird crashing into your car can potentially harm the driver. At that speed, you cannot account for every eventuality. So outright lap time with Valkyrie on the track is also almost impossible to beat, and the point where you're pulling 4 or 5 Gs in the corners, there's really no reason to go any faster ever. So outright performance, I think we've reached peak. But outright joy and outright fun and outright pleasure, which in my mind aligns closely with Neanderthal punch to the gut and extreme experience and a healthy measure of pain as well. I think we can deliver on that. I think we can deliver on that in a much more focused way going forward. I had a really interesting experience once with a car that was prepared for lap records, Koenigsegg Regera, and I was driven by a Le Mans podium finisher driver on a track, and he's an incredible driver, and the vehicle is an incredible vehicle, so it was top experience in the car that I ever had. And on the same day, we went for a bit of driving on the country roads in a Lotus Exige that was prepared for club racing with semi-slick tires, completely bare bones interior, 5-point harness, and just the plexiglass windows. And I have to say, the way that Lotus shakes your brains out, if I was an alien visiting Earth and I had to drive in the Regera and the Lotus, I would not necessarily say that one was so much more fun than the other. I mean, one of them was outright faster, no doubt, but the other one made my body hurt the next morning, and I appreciated that. There's a sense of pleasure in that level of extreme experience. I think a lot of our customers, they seek that extreme experience as well, and it's not necessarily tied in with outright lap time or outright acceleration figures. It's more on the emotional level.
Thanks, Sasha. Would anyone like to pick up on that before I move on, Guy?
I like the thought that we can use innovation to support the human body to go through something that's more extreme. Maybe it's a seat that can that takes some of the impact out, so that you can actually go beyond what we thought was possible for a human being to survive through. So if we can use innovation to actually make a product that, we're human beings. We love to go beyond and excel and beat ourselves. So I don't see us stopping doing that ever. So if we can find clever ways to make it without completely, harming the person, but still a small amount of pain or a little bit extra for Sasha, then a great thing.
Thanks, Guy. One of the things I noticed as well between the two presentations was very much a focus on the desensitizing nature of technology and how it can dull maybe our senses, but also Dan was very much in this idea that technology can enhance it in a way of customization. And maybe I'll start with you, Dan, about this view of technology as an enhancer as opposed to a desensitizing force, I guess.
Well, everybody's angry, everybody's frightened, everybody's unhappy. The world is in a mess. Our vehicle is probably the happiest time that we're on Earth, or in a plane, or isolated. So if we cannot do it in a fast car, I think that we are going to do it virtually or augmented. We will actually be able to attend the Qatar Grand Prix as a driver by using a headset, maybe a haptic seat or a bodysuit, so that you can feel and experience exactly what the driver is experiencing. And you will not know the difference. You are in that seat. You are in the pit stop. You are being driven. So I think technology can actually liberate us from our mundane and sad lives. And it'll be accessible to everybody, because we all have a smartphone, and we'll have an app on our phone that says F1 Grand Prix. Boom, we're there. So it's going to be much more democratic. Supercars are for the elite, for the 1%. the internet and the metaverse is going to open that up to everybody. And that's going to be when the world will be really impactful and interesting and potentially beautiful.
Thanks, Dan. Sasha, would you like to pick on that?
Yeah, I guess I am personally much less fascinated by technology. I don't find it attractive. I don't need VR in my life. I want real experiences, and I think that a lot of people have fatigue from technology. I find a lot of people, when I meet with customers of sports cars that I worked on, that share that sentiment, that they miss simple things in their life, fun things that are not connected with digital world. And when we say sports cars and hypercars are for the elite and for the few, I just mentioned the Exige, and the Exige in that particular setup was not more expensive than an average Volkswagen Golf. So the level of fun to be had is not necessarily tied in with big bucks, not at all. And I would rather invest that little bit of money that is my disposable income, if I'm not the top 1% of the high earners in this world, into a very bare bones MX-5 type sports car that brings me joy whenever I drive it, than something that is augmented, enhanced, and fake. I don't want fake things anymore.
Thanks,
Are you calling me fake? No.
Not you personally. I'm calling the idea of technology augmenting our lives something I'm tired of.
And this is actually, because a large part of your presentation as well, Guy, was focused on this kind of enhanced experience. But Sasha's point is absolutely valid. These visceral thrills can be had on a budget if possible, but do we need more technology in our lives, I think is the fundamental question.
My feeling is that we are going to be happy with it if the technology can enhance the real experience, not replace the real experience. So if we can go faster, safer, nothing wrong with that. That's a good thing for the world. We can go faster with reducing how much we affect the planet or in a negative way. But I completely agree that the visceral part is what makes a supercar. Oh wow, I managed to get around that corner and I was on the edge of a limit. And if you know that there is no way I'm going to get to the edge of a limit because I'm in a virtual world and there's no danger, yeah, there's no issue, then I think it's a different experience. It's a PlayStation experience. There's nothing wrong with that, but it's not a supercar. And so I think the PlayStation world's only going to get better and better, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that at all. But in the supercar world, there's going to be people who want that real experience, and they want to find a way to make it more extreme. You could sort of liken it to the Olympics or some world athletics thing where there are people who they're the world champion because they took it to the extreme. And there'll be people who will argue that they could go a little bit faster if we augmented them with springs in their heels or some chemical enhancement. On what's the right thing? What's the human experience? It's still a human experience that we want to exceed ourselves constantly. Yeah.
Just one thought I wanted to add to this, again coming back to the Grand Prix yesterday. I don't know about you guys, but I'm going there to see the best drivers compete and be gladiators on the track. And I personally would go back to manual gearboxes, naturally aspirated V12s, cars that weigh 500 kilos. And I would make sure there's no augmentation, no assists, no technology. I would even cut everything electric out of the car. Just thank you.
Which actually leads seamlessly into my next point, and that is the electrification of cars has always been seen. I don't know that it's been fully questioned as much as perhaps it should have been, and it seems to be, the more I speak to people, it's almost a given. It's this is what we're doing. In the realm of supercars, this is a really interesting sort of point, because as Sasha just said there, V12s, V8s, this is the thing that attracts us. But in a world of electrification, what does that mean? Where does that leave us, I guess, not just in supercars, but just in automotive in general? I won't talk too long because everyone's here to hear you guys, but I did a test day with various cars, very, very bog standard cars from sort of, manufacturers. Although the electric cars were faster, the petrol cars gave you more thrills, without doubt. Anyway, I'll stop talking now. And whoever would like to pick up on that, I don't mind.
Yeah, I think to various points said here that the visceral experience of the noise, the sound, the bass tone, punching you, the Neanderthal punch to the stomach. These things, you don't want to replicate them virtually or artificially. You want maybe a different experience. And I think both are valid. I have no issue at all that there are people that want the Olympics to be no augmentation, and I have no problem that there are other people that want there to be some way of, let's see what is the limit of how we can use technology to enhance. Both are valid. It isn't a seesaw that you have to choose one or the other. We can have both races. We can have the Formula One stripped down version, and we can have the Formula One E-Formula if we want. I think there's room for it all, and the human condition is that we'll all try and do it, and there'll be something for everyone in that. Yeah, not everyone is in one bucket. There's a huge number of people.
The evolution of mobility is going to have almost nothing to do with the powertrain. We can have fuel cells, we can have electric, we can have ICE. The evolution of mobility is going to be derived, enhanced, and optimized with collision avoidance. Because when cars won't hit each other or hit a wall or hit a bird, then you can go fast. And you can actually be on the road with everybody else and do whatever you want, because the car will stop and it'll maneuver and it'll swerve, and you'll be safer but also more exhilarated because you can push the envelope a lot faster, because when you don't have collision, you don't have bumpers, you don't have airbags, you don't have any structure. You can have a bubble and you can drive as fast as you want, and now everything is going past you and you're going through the air because you are not going to worry about hitting something. Look at a helicopter. A helicopter is just a bubble because it's not designed for crashworthiness. There's no airbags. You do have a seatbelt, but that's it. So technology is going to allow us to fulfill our speed demon fantasies, because we can go fast now and we can do things that we couldn't do before. So it's a win-win. Everybody wins. There's less accidents. I want a motorcycle, but my wife won't let me buy that Ducati that I want because she says, you're going to kill yourself. Well, what if my Ducati never hit something or was hit by something? All of a sudden, that argument goes out the window. So I think we are going to evolve, and our transportation, our mobility, and our aspirations are going to be driven with technology and enhanced and modified. So it's going to be a win-win. And I think he's going to have his car, I'll have my car, and Guy will have his car, and they'll all be the same, but they'll be different. And that's a beautiful world. That's utopia.
Sasha?
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot of, being part of the industry, I hear a lot of future visions and fantasies. I am generally a more rational and logical person. I always think about things that prevent these fantasies from being reality. And somebody mentioned the presence of dumb cars on the road. What are we going to do with those? How sustainable is it to demand that every vehicle is a smart vehicle? Or should we throw away everything that was already produced? In my mind, the value of products of our civilization is too high to just throw stuff away. I think that it's unfair to create a vehicle, engineer it, produce it, dig up minerals from the earth, and then just replace it because somehow we feel it's less fashionable now and there's this next new thing around. So I think sustainability is more about going away from short life cycles and actually building things that last. And in that world, capsules that fly somehow seem very far away in my mind, and maybe in the cities that are bespokely built for that sort of transport. But I think it's unfair to demand that the entire population of a city switches from their, hard-earned vehicles that they worked for and spent money on, and just they all switch over to something else. I think we were speaking about that with some of my English colleagues and friends, and what's happening in London right now, where the poor are being punished with not being able to drive their cars in the city. I find that, if anything, very discriminatory practice. So I think coexisting of technology and some of the older things is what we should aim for. And in that sense, the burden is on the technology to coexist with the old stuff and not to outlaw it, to design new things in the way that they fit into existing infrastructures and not to create all new infrastructures for those new things. So in that sense, yeah, EVs are going to be a huge part of the future, and they're already ubiquitous. And if we find a way to produce those batteries in an environmentally sustainable way, I think every car should be an EV in that sense. It's much less polluting to the air. You feel the quality of the air improving in the cities with EVs around. But I wouldn't like to do that by outlawing or forcing everybody to switch over and throwing away a lot of very well designed, engineered, and functioning vehicles. I think that's irresponsible. So everybody should go EV, but there should still be space for sports cars, and should still be space for hypercars, and those should be taxed appropriately, and they should be made available appropriately, and it should be a guilty pleasure of sorts to drive them, but it should still be possible. And that's how I see it.
Wonderful. Thanks, Sasha. Actually, I think it's probably a good moment now. We've got just over 10 minutes left, and I'd love to hear some thoughts and have some questions from the audience. I think there's a couple of roving mics going around. I'll try and pick you out. If you put your hand up, we can bring a mic to you. If there's nobody who's got any questions, I can carry on, but I'm sure that wouldn't be as interesting. Anyone out there?
Thank you. Question for all of the panel. Supercars, obviously they used to be based around speed and the visceral excitement. You're all talking about at least three different views as to where they might go in the future. What would you say would be, if you like, the sort of human sensory peak experience of a supercar in the future? It's not the force physically accelerating. We've dismissed that. We understand why. What would you imagine, though, is the sort of core, ultimate experiential component that might come from experiencing one of these things?
Good question. Who wants to start?
Far too good a question.
Too hard a question, you mean, Guy? We can hand over to someone else if you need time to think.
I think when we showed those pictures of the young people and then how they're going to think in the future customer has just grown up with technology. Yeah, Sasha's banned it apparently from his kids, I've found out, and but they're used to it. They're used to this world of technology. It doesn't mean that they don't wish for some visceral, real reflection or something coming back to them, that their action caused them to have this experience. And just like I think you said it as well, that there's people that want a real experience. They want to go and see a creature in nature without affecting nature, rather than just watch the TV program. They want to do these things. I think that's a very true thing as well. So what is the visceral thing in the future? I think it's still going to be around those core components of acceleration, speed, and handling, because I think they're so key. But I think some other areas might change. I think we're already seeing it with the electric cars, that as we said earlier, the sound and the smell of the internal combustion engine maybe needs to be replaced with something, or maybe has another element to it. I also think kids are they'll have a sport element to it. You'll get a score for driving around a track based on how well you performed, how the G's that you got to will be measured, and they'll have a chart to say, I got to this many G's, and they'll compete with their friends about it. I think this is, in the clubs, already in sports car clubs, people are competing with each other about what their lap time was, or when they did a club day or something. So I think this technology will just make that exaggerated and make it more presented and app-based, and because that's the flavor of younger generations going forwards.
There's two types of rides at amusement parks. There's a traditional roller coaster where you're thrown and hurled into corners and being turned over and being abused, and that's thrilling. And that's what we want. That's why you go to an amusement park, and that's why you go on a roller coaster. But there's also now the emergence of what they call dark rides. And a dark ride is where you're sitting in a chair and you're getting the same acceleration, G-forces. The video is propelling your brain, telling you that you're going very quickly. So I think as Guy mentioned, you could program your car, even though you're stuck in traffic, to feel and sense all of the experiences of a supercar. So technology will also assist in the simulation of driving fast and reckless and irresponsible. Because very few of us can actually get out on a racetrack and drive an expensive car and smell the fuel and hear the burning rubber. That's fine for a small percentage of us, but everybody else is stuck with plan B, which is the next best thing. And I think that's going to actually be more sustainable for the planet, but also more accessible. So I'm all about accessibility. And that, I think, is going to be, because look, there's 6 billion people on Earth. 1 million, if lucky, can go fast on a sunny morning in the country. Everybody else is stuck in traffic. Everybody else is stuck in their apartment. I lived in China for 15 years. It was horrible. The average road speed in Beijing is 24 kilometers an hour. And here you got supercars, you got hypercars, you got Bentleys and Rolls Royces and Porsches, and they're all stuck in traffic. So the reality is we can't do everything we want to do, but we can get there other ways, and that's going to be the cool stuff, I think.
I think it's a good question, and I'm going to stick to my guns here. I think it's a timeless experience. It's not about past or future. It's about what is the absolute, and I'm a big believer in absolutes. I think Frank was the one who pointed out that beauty is a universal construct, a universal concept, and I'll take it even further. I think beauty is not in the eye of the beholder at all. It is either there or it's not. And it's a fundamental building block of the universe. As you said about nature, it spoke true to me. I also believe that nature teaches us what is beautiful. So what is the sensory experience? Well, first, when you see the vehicle, your heart has to quicken. You have to feel a rush of adrenaline, of emotion, just from the sheer beauty of the object that is in front of you. And the experience continues the more intimate you get with the vehicle. The moment you touch the surface, the moment you open the door, the moment you interact with the way it clicks, the moment you feel the haptic feedback, the auditory feedback, it's the full... The experience is almost erotic. There's a sense of kind of fulfillment of all your senses that comes into play when you're interacting with the vehicle on that level. And of course it goes into driving. Of course it goes into becoming one with the machine, feeling its chassis, feeling its the way it moves under you. It's an experience that is close to emotional peak of all your senses. And I don't think that augmentation is the right way to seek it. I think building these vehicles in real and putting our heart and soul and our sweat and our blood and our tears into those vehicles is the only way to evoke that level of emotional response from the customer.
So I can gather from that, Sasha, you're not a huge fan of AI designed technology.
No.
Has anyone else got any questions for the lady in the middle there? Can we get a microphone?
In light of the exciting opportunity of having GIMS here for the next 10 years, what trends are there, for example, that we can look to in Saudi Arabia with Line and Neom and all of the money and intellectual curiosity about design? Do you see playing out in the market and in the future of automotive design that we can see today at DECC and in the future in the region?
Who would like to leap onto that one?
I can have a go. So, in my career, I've spent most of my life working not in the country I was born. 11 years in Sweden, a year in France, 6 years in Australia, 10 years in China, and a few other bits and pieces. And everywhere I've gone, even though I'm not of that nationality, I've tried to evoke some spirit of that, of a product that's from that location, especially if it was a global product, a product that was going to go to other countries and represent its home base. So, and it's quite an interesting thing. I've presented Scandinavian design to a bunch of Scandinavian architects, and I'm not Scandinavian. And I've presented Chinese design to a room full of high officials, and I'm not Chinese. But that's part of the role of a designer. You have to think externally and look at a situation and do the right thing. I made the mistake in Australia because their products weren't actually going globally. They were only for Australia. So they didn't actually need to be reminded that they were Australian. So there's always an anomaly in there. But I think the same thing for this region. We were actually at the Museum of Islamic Art yesterday and seeing some of the motifs and things which are intrinsically of this region or of Islamic faith. I think there's a very interesting thing there that can be, it's got to be very careful, I think, when it comes into anything that's either political or religion-based. You've got to be a little bit careful because it can polarize people a little bit. So, but I think if there are many times when you do a design where you have a reason, you have a story behind why you did it, and you very rarely get to tell people what that story was. They just experience the car. And the nice thing is when they just go, I like it. I don't know why, I just like it. And that's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. If they get, maybe it's a subconscious thing that you included something to make them feel good, or that's something that comes from their heritage or their background or their belief system or whatever it is, that's fine. But I think any brand, if you're trying to evoke your nationality in some way, you can do that in a sensitive way that doesn't put anybody off, that's got a different system or different belief or whatever, but helps those that do. I think that's an interesting area to look further into, yeah.
Dan, I'd love you to jump in, but we are out of time. So
I was just going to say, are they on the line in Saudi Arabia? They need to add zip lines so that you can get from point A to point B and have fun. That's it.
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Sorry, I'd love to carry on, but we're out of time. Thanks to our panelists, Guy, Sasha, and Dan. Thanks, guys. And this time to discuss, to rethink luxury. So if you could just slowly make your way to your seats, that would be wonderful. Luxury in itself is, I suppose, a subjective term. We've all got our own ideas as to what it means. I think we're in a very interesting moment in design when everything is up for grabs, and we're discussing the idea of what luxury might mean in the future. Will it be more sustainable materials? Will it be experiential? Will it be more of the same? We shall see. And anyway, I'm going to bring on our panel, who are going to help me to do a deep dive into the subject, and they are Felix Kilbertus, who's Chief Creative Officer of Pininfarina, and he was former head of exteriors at Rolls-Royce. Ideally placed to talk about luxury, I'd say. Young Kwang Nam, hitherto known as YK for the purpose of the discussion. He is the lead interior designer at Bentley. And finally, Sam Livingstone, who's the director of design strategy consultancy, Car Design Research, former editorial director of Car Design News. So I almost feel like there's a kind of nice connection there. Anyway, guys, same format as before. I think we're going to have some presentations from you guys, and then we'll have a discussion, hopefully a very fruitful one. Sam, I think you're first up, is that correct?
I'm happy to be first up, James. Good. I wasn't anticipating that, but I'm very happy to be.
Well, I don't actually know. Maybe I've got that wrong. Felix, is it you?
I believe it's me.
Please excuse me. Felix, you go for it. I don't want to give the AV guys heart palpitations.
Very good, very good. So, first of all, a very warm welcome from my side. So I have the pleasure to represent Pininfarina, a design house with quite a legacy. And I have the pleasure of leading a huge creative team. We have about 100 creatives and many co-creatives. We have also modelers, 3D modelers, physical modelers, and many co-conspirators, creative technologists, and people working in all the other fields linked to design, of course. We have the engineers and communications experts and so on. So I want to give you a little bit of a glimpse what we do as an agency, maybe also tell you where we came from, some of our roots, and how that is connected to luxury. And then I'm very much looking forward to a discussion, a panel with you, of course, James, YK, and Sam. Let me start off by saying that at Pininfarina we do essentially two things. We do moving and we do living. And we do these two things on land, on air, and on water. When I say moving, this of course means mobility, but I specifically mean it also in being in control of a moving vehicle. So there's a very specific skill set that you need to design a vehicle so that you can operate it safely, so that you can actually enjoy operating the vehicle safely in its environment, whether you design this object to be a thrill-seeking object, as Sasha has very eloquently spoken about, or whether it's something that has a very different scope. Of course, this is something that you then discover as you embark on this creative journey. And we do also living. So Pininfarina as a company has started doing product design and architecture for about 40 years now. So these are the two things that essentially we do. And I would like to start today by showing you a short video of some of the many things we do, and to give you an idea of the bandwidth we're dealing with in our design studio. So we move dreams, and we've been moving dreams since 1930. And I want to take you back very quickly to where we started off as a company. We're a company that is deeply linked to the birth of the car industry, of the motor industry. Our founder's autobiography was actually titled Born with the Automobile. And some of the very first cars that Pininfarina, Battista Farina, designed were actually cars like the ones that you see here. Concorso cars, truly elegant cars, very specific cars for individual owners that were really the embodiment of beauty, of speed, and of the excitement that came with the automotive industry, especially in those pioneering days of motoring. So of course they're beautiful objects, but what I like most when I look at pictures from that period is actually the joy and the excitement you see on people's faces, or in how proud they are standing next to these cars. There was an enormous sense of pride, of course, when you commission a unique car. Whether that is back in those days, but I believe it's still the same enjoyment that you get out of creating something that is truly made for yourself, or maybe as thought of as a gift for a very special person. So I would like to say that luxury, the way we understand it, in order to be impactful, it has to have meaning. So we believe really in meaningful luxury, and we believe that first and foremost this is about people. So this is very much where the company started from. You see two cars that are from the pre-World War II period and one that is post-war, because of course the auto industry very strongly shifted its focus post-war, but certain individuals kept commissioning cars, kept asking for very special cars. So this one is a Ferrari that is a one-off that was designed for a gentleman called Gianni Agnelli, very elegant Italian gentleman. And he was a very brave man. He sometimes commissioned extraordinary cars like this very rare, centrally steered prototype. There's only 2 of those ever built. And he's also the man that encouraged us to go into other sectors, to go beyond the car. He commissioned a boat with Pininfarina in 1967, for example. Beautiful. It's called the G50, G for Gianni, and 50 because it was one of the very first boats that actually did 50 knots as a day commuter. So, and I believe that this is what excites us in this journey as we think about the future of luxury, doing something that is both very ambitious but also very, very personal. I also think that luxury is not necessarily something that is linked just to the size of something or the material quality of something or the motorization or the nobility of the powertrain. Luxury can be very much about a sense of occasion. This vehicle, which I consider personally very luxurious, is a car that was specifically made for one spot, for the Hotel Eden Rock in the south of France. And it's the perfect car for that moment. When you step out of the water, you just need to go from a very nice beach back to maybe a spot of lunch somewhere. And it is the right vehicle for the right moment. The car was presented a few years back, and the second car was then custom made for Henry Ford, which I think is quite an interesting detail about this car. I would like to leave you with a second video that embodies what we do today as we think of luxury and as we move beyond the automotive sector as a design house.
Thanks, Felix. Thanks for sharing some of your thoughts. Just before we move on to you, YK, there was one thing I'd like to pick up on just very briefly, and we'll probably get into it a bit more later, but this idea of the patron, the commission, the one-off. This is a very time-honoured idea of luxury, but you still view it in some way in those terms today.
I think this is still at the heart of the automotive dream for us. So this is a unique thing that we're still capable of doing after almost a century. And it is also a human adventure. It's a real pleasure to welcome a co-creative into our team. We have sometimes very, very passionate discussions also. But this is really fun. This is one of the most exciting things. Also for us, and here I speak as a car designer, to know your client personally is an exceptional privilege. Very often in the car industry, you tend to know your client through what we call personas, or through abstractions of the ambitions of a target group. You know, as horrendous as that word already sounds. So working for an individual client or for a patron is a real honor, and it's a truly fun experience.
And I suppose at best collaborative, at worst, do you nearly wring each other's necks at some point?
It becomes like family, you know.
with all that brings
Absolutely.
with it. Yeah. YK, you're next. Would you like to go?
Hello everyone. Today I'll be showing you a glimpse of our future luxury. So maybe I'll start with a short clip of our concept car that we did a few years ago. EXP 100 GT was our centenary concept car to celebrate our 100 years of heritage, and it forms an inspirational and aspirational brand vision for Bentley future. So we've focused on experiential luxury and extraordinary journeys. So we believe our brand is a perfect example for harmony of polarities. Bentley has always delivered both driving performance and ultimate driven luxury. For example, we have a very strong Le Mans heritage to Queen's car. And so in this particular concept car, we have a very flexible seat configuration which expresses both drive and driven world. So I think as a brand that we driving was a very strong like one of the strengths of the brand, and we think we wanted to keep that for our future as well. So we're trying to keep both drive and driven world in a single vehicle. And we believe luxury is the ultimate state of wellness. It's all about you getting into the car and getting out of the car in a much better state of wellness. So in order to achieve that, we had a air purification which optimizes the air quality within the cabin. So by isolating from the environment or enhancing the scent from the environment, so bringing in the scent from outside into the car, so you're fully engaged with your journey. And luxury services, we had this intelligent cartridge system, which could be preloaded before the journey, so each customer could customize each cartridge. And we had a bespoke capsule with different contents in. We had a lot of different scenarios, and then we had a pure water decanter that was in the console. So it was all about enhancing the luxury service within the vehicles throughout your journey. Luxury sustainable material will take a big part in our future luxury, and highly executed woven textile not only reduces the leather content in the vehicle, but also gives a very unique visual of it. And also it helped us to revive some of the old techniques, such as a trapunto, trapunto technique, which kind of adds three-dimensionality to flat fabric or textile. Copper infused with 5,000-year-old oak, which has been rescued from a river, Funland River. So we're not cutting down the tree to have wood in the car. We're trying to, use a sustainable material sourcing. Moving on, beyond the sustainability of the materials themselves, we aspire to sustain and preserve the skills and craft by collaborating with different experts, craftsmanship, and the artisans all around the world. As you can see here, each element in this car was all handcrafted, and each of them had a unique collaboration with different artisans. We also used the light as material to enhance the experience within the cabin. What we really pushed for was to bring in the outside into the vehicle. So as you can see here, we have a chandelier that's built into the roof structure, so it harvests the light from outside. And this shows a sketch. And then, as you can see here, it's all mixture of the craftsmanship and the technology. And we call this magical fusion of craftsmanship and technology. And talking about the magical fusion, we wanted to hide all the technology behind all these objects, each element of the car. So here we have a centerpiece for the UX. So it's a physical manifestation of Bentley Assistant harnessing AI technology. So we still want to keep tactile elements within the car and try to hide technology as much as possible. And rear occupant has this equivalent centerpiece. What we also wanted to do was humanizing technology. So we wanted to have more emotive connection between the customer and the vehicle, also the environment. So how we achieved that was we wanted to allow customers to capture the moment whilst they're driving or being driven in the car. So the AI can capture the journey. So whenever you want to relive that moment, so for example, you drive through a really nice forest, and then on the next day you're in a mega city. So you can reload the memories from the drive throughout the forest, and then you can enjoy that moment in the megacity. So it's all about reliving that moment, like purely enjoying being in the car. And as you can see here, we use interactive smart glasses to hide, fully integrate all the technology into the architecture and material itself. We, as a brand, we really want to go away from having dull black screens. We use the word digital detox. Every time we get a design brief, we say digital detox. So how can we hide all this technology behind the architecture or the materials themselves? Lastly, I've got a slide of our time capsule. So to celebrate 100 years of our heritage, we wanted to celebrate the people who are behind these cars, designing, creation of this vehicle or manufacturing of this vehicle. So what we had was we had a time capsule, we had a scroll with everyone's name on it, and then we sealed it in the car. So it's memorabilia for the future generation. Thank you very much.
Just before we go on to Sam, I'm quite intrigued by the idea of using technology to hide technology. Like it seems a mild sort of paradox there, but you know, this is something that's key to some of your work at the moment.
Yeah, so obviously we are working on electric cars as well, and the challenge is, you know, how do we hide all these screens? Obviously, you see all these other brands, other OEMs having big screens, like more technology, but we really want to keep the tactile feel within the interior. So, you know, like I think luxury is about like the seamless experience, you know, throughout the journey. You don't need all this information when you drive. You only need very few information. So when you're driven, I think it's key to get rid of all the distraction. And that could be, we believe, you know, technology could be good, but it could also be a distraction in a luxury point of view. Yeah.
Great, thanks YK. Sam, you want to bring us home?
Thank you very much, James. Yeah, good afternoon, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's great to be here, and thank you, James, for inviting me to be here, and nice to hear two talks from my esteemed panel guests. So I've just got a placeholder here, how luxury in car design is changing. I'm going to talk to you a bit about our view at the agency that I run about how luxury in car design is changing. I've just got one page to put up in front of you now, which at least gives you some sense of where I speak from, because I'm not from Pininfarina, a famous car design agency, nor Bentley, a brand I think we all know. I run a small agency, we're called Car Design Research, but we have worked for lots of brands, including these, and the work that we do is directly with the design groups and sometimes the wider creative teams, including management, to establish what is the future strategy for these brands, what is their intention with design, with the portfolio, with the brand, and to support them in mapping this out in the future. Increasingly, we are working with startups from China and indeed from the Middle East to do just that. So that's the nature of the work that we do. And this is, if you like, the perspective that I stand and speak to you from today. With luxury, I think it's a really interesting word, isn't it? We all kind of know luxury. We can have a luxury chocolate. We can stay in a luxury hotel. We kind of know luxury. It's a common word. Having said that, whilst we're familiar with it, it is quite hard to put your finger on exactly what it means. And in this region, of course, my sense is that there's a huge experience of it. It strikes me there's some money here. It strikes me that it's a very different landscape, if you like, of luxury, and therefore a body of consumers who really do have a very specific understanding as to what it means. Now, it's not my job to tell you what luxury is. I'm sure you don't want to hear my individual perspective on what it is. It is hard to singly describe, and we all have our different views, but what I thought I would do is just put up a few kind of rather interesting quotes, I think, about what it might be. The first one here, since Roman times, the definition of luxury has been based on a semantic slippage between the words luxus, splendor, pomp, and sensuality, and its derivative luxuria, riot, excess, extravagance. So here is a definition. These are all quotes from academics and authors of books specifically on the subject. And that's a definition we might take on board. More simply, luxury is a great refinement in the gratification of senses. Luxury delights us both physically and intellectually because it allows us to absorb, occasionally observe, and perhaps reflect on the outcomes of excessive creative practice, which perhaps is quite pertinent directly following that Bentley presentation. Fashion is fast and seasonal and obsessed with imagery. Luxury is deep and timeless and obsessed with quality. I feel like that resonates for at least some of my colleagues who are speaking today. Luxury begins at the point at which humans surpass necessity. And isn't that an exciting creative concept to embrace? Luxury objects are important, powerful, motivating forces that speak to human care, indulgences, and pleasures. And I'm going to suggest to you that we might all subscribe to all of these. They're distinct definitions, but in many respects they encapsulate the bandwidth of this exciting territory, which is luxury. But what is luxury in car design? Now, once upon a time, luxury in car design was any car. If you could afford a car, the novelty of it, the sheer expense of it, demonstrated that you were wealthy people. You had an aspirational item. Even a Model T Ford with the entire family posing for their photograph, they were that proud, was a luxury item in the days of the horse and cart. But we've obviously moved on from there, and I'm going to suggest simplistically, a luxury car tends to be something large and lavish. Is it a Range Rover? Is it a Rolls Royce? Or maybe it's something derived from a race car, a proper sports car, something that's maybe down here. Now, these are all antiques, of course. And I'm going to suggest that the subject we spoke of this morning, the supercar, is right up here. There is an item which is truly fast and stylish, but actually, whilst not necessarily super large, is certainly lavish. And actually, this dimension here, luxury experience, because fundamentally luxury is not a thing, it's an experiential quality. That, in a simplistic terms, I am postulating, is a combination of these ingredients that we have. This is history, though, and I think one of the things that I really want to put out to you as an idea today from me that's distinct to this presentation is how luxury is actually bound up in culture. In the post-war era, America was exceedingly wealthy. The huge economic development of that nation meant that there was a real spend and exploration as to what luxury meant in America. Here we've got, I think, a 59 Cadillac. And you can see, if you look, the form of that car represents this technology of the age, jet engines, rocket engines. It's very expressive in what it is as well. It's quite proud and happy to communicate to you its success, its scale, its bright work, its many bits of details. And in some respects, you could argue, the American vocabulary of luxury has moved with the fashion of the times, but it still expresses very clearly and very confidently and very happily its excessive and fulsome expression of luxury, and indeed still speaks a lot of its technology, if perhaps more so in the interior than the exterior. European luxury traditionally, of course, on the other hand, is a little different, tends to be more reserved and modest. Perhaps luxury in the old world is less a statement to others of your status and your prestige. It's maybe more about the experience for the wealthy few to consume as individuals. And I think that's a key distinction to hold up to you. And I am being broad brushstrokes. I'm not suggesting this is all about all Americans and this is all about all Europeans, or the brands for that matter either. But simplistically, luxury is something which can be consumed by the individual and appreciated, or on the other side, it's something which can be expressed to an audience, perhaps connected to status. And I'm following up there with an image which Felix is perhaps more familiar with than most of us, of a contemporary Rolls Royce, which again conforms and expresses that more reserved aesthetic and an expression of luxury than we're perhaps familiar with from the States. Now what we're seeing, of course, is the emergence on an international scale of Chinese luxury. And I would suggest to you that Chinese luxury is different again. It is this immediate luxury that it expresses. And what I mean by that is the way that we can immediately see functional features, the unusual door apertures. In this car, should have the film, will spin on the spot. but the way in which it actually has functional features enabled by technology, which express its better than qualities, which express this new lexicon of luxury, which comes from China and expresses the cultural distinction as to what a luxury car is from China. So I've talked to you about what luxury is in simplistic terms. I've given you a few definitions from some learned people. We've translated that into how it's changed over time in automotive and the types of cars that represent luxury, and then also how it's bound up in culture. And I want to leave you with this thought, really. Luxury tomorrow. We've got here an image which I think is quite local to this region. And it strikes me that this region has got, in many respects, new generations of people, a culture which is steeped in history, and yet one which is living very much on the moment. And at the moment, internationally, there's no representation of luxury car from this region, which I find interesting and also an incredible opportunity. We see its expressions in architecture, but maybe when we're here in a few years' time, they won't be shown with an Italian supercar SUV, but with a design which expresses aesthetic and an idea of luxury which is specific from the region. And I'm going to suggest to you that luxury tomorrow really, really will be founded on cultural distinction, on place, and on the people that come from territories, and that will be one of the defining qualities as to what makes luxury car design tomorrow. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam. Actually, that's a fascinating, rapid tour through historic luxury. But I'm very interested in this idea of regional specificity. Sorry, I can't say that. One thing that's I noticed today, visiting this incredible building. I came here yesterday for the rehearsal. One of the things the region gives you, well, many things it gives you, but the play with light in this building is absolutely incredible. And I've got numerous photographs from various different angles of sun peeking through cracks, creating shadows and things like that. And I'm just interested in your thoughts, each of you, as to how that might play out in a regional sort of luxury dynamic using the idea of light and this beautiful light that you have here. I could start with you, Sam, but we can all maybe move this way towards me. Sam.
James, yeah, thanks. I think that actually taking inspiration and or using regionally specific things is not just about culture, it is potentially climatic. One of the things that strikes me immediately on the streets, the amount of white cars, there's all sorts of elements. You've talked about how it informs architecture. Evidently, I'm sure it can inform automotive. But then that quality not only makes a better product for the region, it makes something identifiably aspirational that other regions may seek to have. So it doesn't just have to be broad cultural things, it can be these regionally or climatically specific ingredients, just as you say.
Yeah. YK, your thoughts?
Almost a decade ago, I went to Japan as an exchange student, and it was interesting to hear that the lecturer was explaining why Japanese cars look like this, why they've got, why they are obsessed with details, and why American cars are massive and flashy, big, and the European more preserved, more kind of down to the road, more heavy looking. And he was saying in America, there's like you kind of see the proportion of the car. You don't have many buildings, so it was all about this proportion, like quite big, flashy. Whereas Japan, there are loads of tall buildings, and you only see a bit of the car. So like, that's why they're obsessed with details. European, obviously, we have like a lot of brick buildings, and that kind of influenced, more preserved, more like heavy, mass-looking cars. Yeah. So yeah, I think even if we design a luxury car, like the perception will be very different in different regions. So yeah.
One thing I've noticed, actually, we've only been in Qatar for a few days, but the amount of Land Cruisers you see, Toyota Land Cruisers, for obvious reasons, they're virtually indestructible. And we went out into the desert, and there was no better vehicle to be going around it. But it did get me thinking of this opportunity for design in the Middle East to sort of develop. Is this idea of the car being an extension of the home that you take into these quite hostile environments, and it becomes a sort of central hub that can serve as almost like a a campsite, a mini sort of hub where you have social activities and get together with friends and family. Anyway, that's a slightly different point, but Felix, you can leap in on either light or campsites, I don't mind.
Well, the bonfire, that gives
the bonfire,
you both,
yes.
No, but starting from the light, I think light is very specific to different places on the planet, and it's actually, I think as car designers, you're very aware of that. There's a reason why certain studios produce different work, because you look at things literally differently because there's different light. There's very unique light in California, for example. There's also very unique light in Italy, to a point where you can actually recognize where a place is simply by the quality of the light. And I agree with you, Sam, also on the cultural dimension. It is certain, if we want to stick to cars for a second, certain cars are designed to look very precise in, let's say, a very gray and rainy weather. And that same car looks dull and almost boring in with warm and soft light, because it loses somehow its authenticity in respect to where it was originally conceived. And I think you can say something similar about architecture as well, where especially when you think of luxury, and the deeper meaning of true luxury is being in the right moment, in a good mood, something that makes you feel authentically good. And of course you have to think about the light and the temperature and the humidity, and whether you're in the sun or whether you're in the shadow, or whether it's a particular moment that is important early in the day or late in the day. So light is an essential part of that, just as climate is, and just as culture and regional context is. Absolutely. And beautiful building, and what an honor to be here with you today.
No, it's incredible. Absolutely incredible space.
James, I think that's a great question, though, because you actually feel like you're answering the questions as well as posing them. And we talked about culture. We talked about sort of, if you like, regional specificity, climate, but you're introducing use. And I think that's really interesting, whether that's about the family groups or the sort of, if you like, where people live relative to work, or the things that they actually use cars for. But actually how there might be distinct patterns of usage which impact on the nature of what that vehicle typology should be, the design should be, whether it's a Land Cruiser or otherwise. But evidently, from your little supposition, there is the opportunity for a vehicle's relationship with buildings to be distinct. And that could be a really exciting thing that conceivably, of course, a region such as this with its different parameters might be, in some respects, ahead of the curve on. It could be conceiving something better for this locale, which then has a validity which is ahead of the times for other regions. So there's something really exciting about that as well, James.
I think so, yeah, and I think it taps into this idea of cultural exchange as well, which I find fascinating. You zipped through a few different pieces, but one of the things that stuck out was Chinese design. Now, is there going to be a point where Chinese luxury design becomes a bit more infused with European luxury design to create sort of a hybrid of design? And I'm fascinated by that idea, if I can stick with you for a moment, Sam.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing relative to that, James, and I'm not sure if this is answering your question or stepping from it, which is that the idea of specificity of luxury culturally being exported. So, showing pictures of old Rolls Royces and Bentleys, people, I think, in other regions aspire to have a notional idea of British luxury. And I'm suggesting that actually there's something very exciting about that, certainly from China now, where we are actually just beginning to have a tipping point where there might be, particularly for younger buyers, something aspirational about a modern Chinese luxury expression in Europe or America. Now, at the minute, again, back to this region, there is not, I think, much of an awareness in the sort of major markets as to what constitutes the culturally specific ingredients of luxury here and how they export. But there is in architecture, and that does export. And there is in cuisine, and there are in other elements. And I wonder, and I'm curious, what would there be that comes from the realm of automotive and luxury that can be taken from here? Because it would have real legitimacy, it's got heritage, and proper distinction, and an experiential thing which would be exciting to consume in other regions. And I think that's something quite exciting going forwards too.
Felix, I'm looking at you expectantly for some thoughts, but you don't feel like you have to.
I mean, so many things to say about that. I think, Sam, that's a very good observation, that there's a new sense of luxury, as you say, and I think it has to do also with the moment that China finds itself in, this moment of massive technological change and very and almost an excitement. You showed the image of the 50s Cadillac, which kind of like symbolized that excitement, that openness to new things. You know, all of these amazing technologies evolved in very few years. In the end of the day. So in a certain sense, what we see in China today is similar to that openness to innovation, that openness to excitement. And it is one form of luxury. But I also want to challenge you a little bit on the regionality of luxury, because very often it is the cultural exchange that brings new ideas. So for example, one thing that really struck me visiting the Chateau of Versailles in France was that one of the most prestigious rooms was actually the room that was laid out in Chinese fashion back in 1750, I believe, because it was the most exclusive sort of luxurious materials, these incredible silk tapestries and absolutely perfect lacquerware that the European craftsmen really struggled to make. So I would say that luxury has always been an international exchange of ideas, and I'm very much looking forward to seeing new Chinese luxury ideas coming back into the automotive field, just as they've always been part of the luxury field in general.
Yeah, I think all that you say makes sense, Felix, doesn't it? The whole idea that actually there's something very attractive about foreign, and the exoticness literally is bound up in being not from where you are. And I know, like as you express, this Chinese origin luxury ingredients was so much of an attractive thing throughout Europe. I think the core distinction perhaps today is the way it can be conspicuously conceived to be that there can be a strategic intent to conceive culturally specific luxury for the purposes of consumption externally. We did a lot of work with Toyota, which founded their J Factor and their L finesse design strategy, and a lot that sat behind that was not to authentically create Japanese-ness, but to create a Western perception as to what constituted Japaneseness, and that was the foundation for which they would then base their success in Europe in some respects on the basis that they were appealing to a market by selling what that market understood to be authentically Japanese, even though perversely, of course, it was not. So yeah, this is a real inherent attraction, and it's such an important thing.
It's very complex as well. YK, I've got a question for you, and a lot of your presentation touched on this idea of craft, and there was this idea of sustainability and sustaining these time-honoured crafts and traditions. And it resonated with me, particularly after our visit to the National Museum of Examining Art yesterday, where we were seeing these huge carpets and huge tapestries and very, very careful calligraphy. And I just thought this idea, if you could speak a little bit about this idea of the role of the craftsman in creating something luxurious, as it were.
Yeah, I think, I was nodding quite a lot when Sasha was speaking about this, pure mechanic part of sports car. All these mechanical watches, horse riding, and also longevity of the product. The reason why we keep pushing for sustainable materials sourcing is that it's all about how long this product's going to last, and I think that is part of luxury. And screen, it could enhance, all these technologies could enhance the experience, but it will never, there will be a point where all the other OEMs, all the other people is going to catch up, and it was just going to be normal. And I think that's why we have to sort of not rely on technology where everyone can, even kids in China, from primary school, they're learning how to code, use AI technology to do multiple things. And, it's all approachable, but all this craftsmanship can only come from a person who spent years and years just focusing on that single thing. So I think that's where the, luxury comes from. Yeah.
We've got about just under 10 minutes left, so it's question time again. There are microphones going around, but if anyone has a question for the panel, apart from Sasha, no, Sasha, you can have a question. Please put your hands up. But yes, we'll start with you, Sasha.
All right, guys. Very interesting conversation. Really enjoying it a lot. Great thoughts there. personally, just wanted to say that I'm tired of opulence, and I'm really not excited about another design that brings more stuff, because there's already too much stuff somehow. That's my general sentiment. And I'm thinking about, can we imagine minimalism taking over luxury as a world? And your thoughts, because you guys are in the industry much more than I am, and I just want to know if opulence is bothering you as much as it's bothering me.
I'm going to fudge the response that I'm going to give to that. Designers, for time immemorial, have believed that minimalism makes sense, and I'm part of that. I think the rest of the world doesn't subscribe to that so universally, and so excess, I think, will never disappear. But I think it's often about the balance there, and I'm not telling you anything you don't well know, that actually a luxury environment tends to not be universally excessive, but it may be quite calm and quite reduced and indeed minimalist, but within that there will be some detail or facet which will evidence incredible intricacy and fundamentally decoration and go beyond actual perfunctory, functional quality and be excessive and therefore not truly be minimalist. So fundamentally, I don't think minimalism works, even if complete excess shall never go all the way.
Yeah, from a design point of view, I think I personally like minimalism, and I want to reduce, and I love the idea of digital detox. And we at Bentley, because we've got quite strong two characters fighting each other, Jekyll and Hyde. This performance side of it and luxury side of it. So that's why we kind of divided front cabin and the rear cabin, kind of giving more drive-focused interior with more feature lines. And this is the interior that I'm talking about. And in the rear, we're trying to reduce any lines, unnecessary lines or forms. So give big canvas to for materials to speak themselves. And when you go on Instagram, it's quite now, like when you talk about luxury, it's interesting because people want to show how wealthy they are with our products. And I think if it goes too minimal, like they'll be like, even if they post something on Instagram, there's nothing that they can kind of show off a little bit. So I think it needs a bit of like an opulency as well.
Interesting.
What
Opulence and minimalism together at last.
I mean, excellent question. So I think opulence is not something that I personally like. Opulence has quite a negative connotation in my view, because it suggests that it's something that is non-essential, something that is kind of using something for the sake of being able to use it, something that is devoid of its original function or some sort of function. And Sam, you showed some pictures of the Rolls-Royce Ghost. When we launched the Ghost, we used the word post-opulence, which sounds almost like a contradictory from a Rolls-Royce point of view. But we really meant it. We really tried to simplify things as much as possible. So we used we took care of shut lines. We reduced shut lines. We made pieces longer, therefore harder to make it more serene, more solid looking. We reduced the complexity of the surfaces so that the materials can speak. We took the decoration off so the proportions can express themselves more naturally. So you need to find that balance, and a Rolls-Royce will never be a minimalist object as such. It is an incredibly complex and an incredibly rich, in terms of material quality, manifestation of a car. But I do want to save the idea of decoration from being associated only with opulence. I think decoration has an extraordinary function in actually structuring things, in actually giving things meaning and timelessness. And I'm thinking, of course I'm very influenced having the privilege of living in Italy and in Turin in particular, where you have extraordinarily well-built buildings that are highly decorative. The wooden panels that are really authentically putting, like when you think of a classic door, it's made from wooden beams with a beautifully cut section, and you have a little panel set in, and that panel has maybe a decorative area that invites you to touch. and so on. So I think that we've gone maybe too far sometimes in the idea of minimalism, in this maybe, this enthusiasm to make everything screen-based. We've reduced it so much that the shape kind of lost its meaning because it's devoid of its material aspect somehow, because we're so used to replacing it now with digital elements that we've gone too far. And I really want to bring back decoration as a positive thing, but you need to do it really well. And maybe before modernism, as an architectural, as a design movement, decoration had that function. When you think of a classical facade, you had structures that helped you with, maybe how rainwater would then actually bring dust into certain areas. But because there was a shape and a color and a meaning, it actually looks very good. It actually still, it ages better because it's structured and decorated in a certain way. So, yeah, let me just break a lance for decoration, if it's well done, and not associated with.
You could argue that it ceases to become decoration as soon as it has a function, I suppose. We don't want to get too philosophical, I suppose. Right, okay, anyone, sorry, let me put my glass on. Anyone else got a question for the panel? Yes, gentleman in the front.
Good morning, or good afternoon. Thank you very much, it's been fascinating. My question is, if you look at today's new products in the car industry, you have the new affordable luxury that is really becoming a thing. You have brands like Genesis that are bringing up all these new cars at a more affordable, but with top-notch quality, with all the whistles that you could find in a Mercedes or other big brands. And then you have on the other side the ultra-luxury brands, the Ferraris, the Bentleys, which are going more and more in a higher and higher scale in terms of pricing. I mean, today you can get a Ferrari or a Bentley for nearly the price of a villa in LA. So in reality, and it's becoming more and more about individualization. So it's the one-of-one kind of solution where it's more of a, if you know, it's the car that everyone, 15 or 20 other people have, or 200 other people, but it's the individuality inside the car and the coloring and my question, I don't know if I have a real question, to be honest. It's more, I'd love to hear the thoughts about that. And I guess the question is it sustainable in the long run to actually say this is where luxury is going, is to actually have this individuality and not have back into the 50s or 60s or even all the way to the early 2000s, it was all about how much can I produce. So it's how many S-Class can Mercedes sell, how much Ferraris can be sold in a year, and that's how the economy of scales worked, and companies were profitable. So is that individuality really the way to go, and can it be sustained?
Sam, I'm going to say be super rapid because we are on deadline.
I would say the short answer is yes, and there's two elements to that. One would be to say that there's a consequence that you're describing of increasing wealth. The highest growth sector is high net worth individuals. And obviously that's the fuel to the fire that you're describing. And then the other part of the response is to say that given that growing market or appetite to be satisfied, there shall be a continuation and a progression of what you're describing. And arguably electrification will support that, and other forms of more flexible production, such that we can have more bespoking and we can enter, if you like, a second era of more coach-made vehicles. I think many brands could or should be looking at it much harder because there's a real level of profit to be made in exactly the space you're describing.
Thank you, Sam. YK?
My answer
don't feel you have to.
My answer is yes as well. We were talking about longevity of the product. We're not. It is really personal, and it could go down the generation and kept for a long time. And
like an heirloom.
Yeah. So I think
Felix.
I mean, maybe one aspect is really also luxury is always a moving target. So something that is truly luxurious. Think of central heating, for example. In the 16th century in Northern Europe, central heating was something reserved for the kings. And now, of course, it's a standard feature because technology has moved on. So what you're describing is also a consequence of technology getting better and better, and what you can get now in a mid-market or in a premium brand, just a few decades ago was unthinkable even in the ultra-luxury market. So that's also a consequence of progress, I would say, that luxury then needs to find more rarefied qualities. But yeah, the question is that sustainable? Will there be a new functionality? Maybe there will be a paradigm shift, maybe there's something new. So luxury will remain a moving target. That's exciting.
Wonderful. Okay, thanks very much for your questions, and thanks to our panel, Sam, YK, and Felix. Stick around, because the next session we're going to go straight into, which is going to have a very special guest. But thanks guys. Okay, so the next session is Gandini Almost in Qatar, which is a tantalizing title if ever there was one. I'm going to invite our panel up to discuss a little bit, a bit more, but I'm sure, I mean, Mr. Gandini, Marcello Gandini, needs no introduction. You know, he's designed some of the most iconic vehicles of all time: the Lamborghini Miura, the Countach, and my particular favorite, the Fiat X19. But I'm going to invite our panel up to come and talk to us about this new project, and that is, in order, Simone Carreno, who's Assistant Professor of Interior Design at VCU Arts, Qatar. Welcome, Simone. Marcia Gandini, who's Head of Think Tank PR, and of course, the daughter of Mr. Gandini. And finally, Dr. Alkindi Ajawalbra, and he's the Director of the Qatar Auto Museum, which is currently under construction, and we're looking forward to that opening. But I think we're just going to take a seat, we'll have a discussion, but we're going to have a short film first featuring the great man himself, a movie from Marcello.
Buongiorno maestro, what are you doing almost in Qatar?
Io sono quasi in Qatar per salutare i visitatori e gli organizzatori del Geneva International Motor Show e presentare e vedere un prototipo particolare rivolto al Museo dell'Auto del Qatar e agli studenti del VCOA.
Fantastic! A long-awaited new Gandini prototype. You presented multiple masterpieces over the years. Will this be a new vehicle?
Un nuovo prototipo che aiuti gli studenti a viaggiare fra spazio e immaginazione, architettura e storia, e che parla del passato per accelerare con l'energia degli studenti per quanto riguarda il futuro.
Your creations are ubiquitous and timeless. Your masterpieces already travel in space and time to influence generations. But this is the first time you work with the university. Why?
Nella professione dell'insegnamento del design oggi si vedono stili e trend più che idee. Si lavora in grandi centri stile tra algoritmi e sondaggi che producono risultati spesso modesti.
And why the Qatar Auto Museum and VCU Arts?
A me è piaciuta molto l'idea di poter collaborare con studenti e trovare possibili strade alternative che tutti invocano ma nessuno organizza. Per questo le nostre idee possono trasformare la ricerca in un museo del futuro, dando risposte possibili all'immaginazione.
Maestro, the prototype is called Moving Interiors with Marcello Gandini. What type of vehicle is it?
Noi cerchiamo che lo stile di tutta l'auto nel suo insieme crei delle emozioni alla vista e all'utilizzo dell'automobile in generale.
Moving Interiors in English has a double meaning of physical and sentimental movement. Many of your works are supercars, very fast on the road, but also when stationary. They are emotionally exciting. What does speed mean? What relationship is there between technical performance and its static potential?
L'estetica dell'automobile è quasi sinonimo di movimento e anche a bassa velocità trasforma le sensazioni visive in percezioni tridimensionali anche delle parti non direttamente visibili che comunque partecipano all'aspetto complessivo che è importante per immedesimarsi nella funzione e nel piacere estetico dell'oggetto.
Sustainability. Mobility and environment are often seen as bitter enemies. Doha these days is simultaneously hosting the Geneva International Motor Show, Formula One and Expo 23, which has the Green Desert as its objective. What are the sustainable paths explored by Moving Interiors with Marcello Gandini?
È una semplificazione, diciamo, del metodo di costruzione dell'auto, utilizzando sia materiali e tecniche diverse e nuove, e la sostenibilità di tutte le operazioni.
After this positive message, I would like to thank you with a symbolic gift, a sestertius of Italian soil, designed and hand-produced by Italian artisans for the visitors of the Italian pavilion at the Expo. It is a coin that melts to become fertile. Like your works, it is a vehicle that connects the countries. May it become common ground to grow fruitful projects as the Moving Interiors with Marcello Gandini. Grazie, maestro.
Grazie e arrivederci quasi in Qatar.
How do you see the role of the designer evolving in the future?
Per quello che penso io sarà più legato all'ideazione vera, diciamo, del concetto automobile. Non solo avranno l'importanza dell'originalità, della novità, ma permetteranno un vero progresso anche quello che riguarda la costruzione e l'utilizzo dell'automobile.
What lessons can young designers take from your work to help them shape the future?
La cosa più importante è cercare di discostarsi dalle abitudini del momento o anche del passato, per cercare di dare un'impostazione nuova proprio al modo di pensare e al modo di disegnare sia l'automobile che qualunque altro oggetto per quel che mi riguarda. Io ho disegnato molte cose oltre all'automobile, magari meno importanti come case, oggetti.
If you were to design an iconic car for the modern era, what would it be?
La conoscenza chiara degli obiettivi permette già di risolvere non diciamo metà del problema, ma almeno l'inizio del problema. E per il resto bisogna un po' affidarsi, diciamo, anche alla fantasia, cioè cercare di non riprodurre semplicemente quanto è già stato fatto.
Why do you think your work is still talked about and referenced?
Quando ero molto giovane non avrei mai pensato che si parlasse del mio lavoro, però le stesse idee guida che oggi tutto sommato ho ancora molto presenti è la necessità di essere originali, di essere, non dico anticonformisti, ma comunque di pensare in modo diverso.
I hope you all enjoyed that. Simone, you were all over the map there. That must look like hard work. And now I'd love to invite Marzia to give us a personal message from her father.
Well, first of all, before the message, I would like to thank Simone and Antonio Zuliani, who's in the audience, because they did an amazing job in these 3 days for filming and editing and finally putting together this video in so many different places here in Qatar. So really thank you. And a big thank also to the Geneva Motor Show organization for the support in that, and to Dr. Al-Kinley for, again, the support. Really, thank you so much, and a big, big, big applause to you again. Now, as you know, my father is not here. He would have loved to come. A bit of a back pain and not really young, so I'm here on his behalf. But I'm now reading a message that is from him, so I'll be the reader. You are all here probably because you love the automobile and the dream it has embodied for nearly a century and a half, freedom. I have been lucky enough to explore this dream in all its possible forms for the past 6 years. And from this long experience, I carry a message with me, which I want to convey especially to the younger generations, but that can certainly apply to a wider audience. Dare. Fight to never do what someone else has already done. Don't even repeat yourself. Find solutions, perhaps difficult ones, but new ones. Study, acquire a solid understanding of the automobile, all the technical knowledge, all the necessary preparation, and then prioritize audacity in your goals. I know it's not easy. I see today's automakers, especially those dealing with luxury cars, indulging in the temptation of creating products that are always the same, endless replicas of the past. It would be beneficial to respect that past by never copying and ruining it, and at the same time to demonstrate entrepreneurial and creative courage by looking forward, supporting true genius, innovation, avant-garde. Creating dream cars by following cold marketing logics can certainly bring cash flows to a luxury brand, but it destroys the very concept of a dream, boring us to death. Anyone who wants a place in the history of car design must find a balance between budgets and dreams, avoiding the most convenient and predictable compromises. I wish the younger generations a time as close as possible when change and courage are a mandatory voice in the business plans of companies and in the strategy of every CEO. I'm on your side, Marcello Gandini.
It's absolutely fantastic, and thank you for reading that, Marcia. And actually, I've got a question for you, because it came up in the video as well. Mr. Gandini, or Marcia, your father is thinking about legacy and passing on his knowledge in some ways to the new generation, but he hasn't done it until now. I just wondered, what was it that really prompted him to think, okay, I have an obligation in some way here?
Well, I'm not sure it's an obligation, but I've heard my father always saying one thing about his projects. When you ask my father, what is your favorite project, which is the car you really liked among the one you designed, you always answer, it's not the car, it's the team. So probably the reason why we're here now for this project is a team. Because Simone is a big fan of my father, of course, and I think he put together the energy and the team that really convinced my father that would be useful, but also creative and fun to do a project such as this one. He's never been someone who wanted to teach or transmit a message by being on a stage. His message is the content of his work, is trying to teach with this kind of messages. He's always given this kind of messages. Every interview he does, he try and convince that repeating things, repeating ourselves is not easy. So this is a message for everybody, for an audience, and also for a masterclass that we're about to produce.
Just before I go on to the masterclass, because I would love you to unpack it a bit more for us, Simone, but I was thinking it's a really interesting moment. You had these iconic figures in design, and your father was one of them, but we all think of him as Gandini, this kind of, this incredible designer. But actually, he was a team man, really. He wasn't...
Totally,
yeah.
yes. I mean, maybe it's not a question of being a team man in terms of building up a company. He never wanted to do that because he didn't want to be forced to accept works only because he had to pay wages of his employees, which is something you have to do when you have a big company. But the team and the people, maybe it was, well, I really loved Frank's Stephenson story about the Mura people when he did this project, because this is exactly that. The people, the night spent together for going to Geneva on time, this was what really counted to him and counts today as well.
And the master classes, tell us a little bit more about how it's all going to work in Simone.
So as you saw today, we tested, so also it's not only Marcello Gandini almost in Qatar, but this is almost a master class, a test of how we would do it, because we saw from today's presentation that the dilemma is tradition and innovation, technology, diversity, local relevance. So the fact that Marcello Gandini accepted to test his knowledge with a new region, with a new kind of student body. Our students in VCU Art are mainly women. So that's an interesting aspect of mobility. And we see today the diversity, gender diversity is Marzia, for example. But also age. So we're all the same generation. So I really appreciate this approach. And we don't know yet what's going to be in precisely because it will develop. But as you know, masterclass is a series of lectures, so probably would be 4 lectures about topics that you all know if you know Marcello Gandini from his interviews and his work. The challenge, I think, is to see what happens in this mobility sense. We heard before the idea that vehicles here are extension of houses, so it's a space that is protecting you from the environment, but also engaging the environment. And I'm teaching in interior design, so this class will be done for VCU Art Interior, but we wanted to extend and move to the Multiversity, to Education City. So not only we try to get Marcello Gandini almost in Qatar, but we try to explain through Qatar, through this experiment, that this is a general challenge. How we drive, we don't drive. Many people here do not drive. They have a driver, or in the future we all have this changing role. So I think it's this is an announcement, so we're looking forward to show you the first test, probably by the beginning of the year. It depends a lot on the Qatar Auto Museum, which is developing at the same time.
And tell us about this relationship between the two entities, Gandini.
Well, I have to thank Simone for bringing this project. I remember we started talking about this project exactly 1 year ago here in the National Museum of Qatar. So Simone was arriving to Qatar his first year to teach at VCU, and I took him on a visit to our small gallery where we are putting a teaser for the future Qatar Auto Museum. And I was telling him about the vision for the museum, and I continued to say that envisioning this museum at the end of oil era, and it should not be about just displaying car. Our museum is much more than that, and I kept saying that all what I want to do is to really inspire and bring students and designers together to innovate and think about future forms of mobility, and to think how are we going to move in the future. This is part of the main mission of the museum. And Simone has been in love with Gandini for ages, I think. So
I think we're all a little bit in love with Gandini, if you like cars.
So we started talking about those ideas, and I just found that this project encapsulates kind of all the vision that we want to do. We want to bring the best educator in the world, and if we want to speak about mobility and we want our students in Qatar to learn about mobility, who can be better than Gandini? I think it's a great opportunity. And this also touch on the ideas that like Sam and other panelists were talking about, like when will we start creating regional specific ideas when it comes to mobility, when we will start creating local specific luxury, local specific supercars. there is great passion for the subject in the region, but we never kind of took it in, I would say, methodological way into like education. So I see this project as just a small seed that will hopefully grow into a much bigger educational collaboration between the museum and VCU and even other universities in the country, that they are partnering with us in the project. From Qatar University to Texas A&M, all of them are like part of our project. So I'm looking forward for the master class, and I think I will be the first student to register to learn from Gandini.
I think I'd like to enroll as well. Not that I harbour ambitions to be a designer, but I feel like I could learn so much, and I think we all could. Just on the kind of the development of the museum, and I was talking to Frank earlier of his presentation about this idea of the new and ambition. And I think Qatar as a country is in a very, very interesting moment, because you have your future in front of you and you are in a position to write it, if you like. Now, I don't know how long it will be before we start seeing ideas coming out of the design courses to shape the future, but do you have a sense of that there is a real opportunity here for Qatar to sort of map its destiny in a way that may avoid some of the mistakes that we've made elsewhere in the world?
If I may answer, I think definitely we have great opportunity to do that. I think this master class is part of the answer. We are trying to be part of making a new future. So we are not just going to sit and wait for it to reach us. It's a very small step, but I hope it will grow, and I'm sure Simone's student will come up with great ideas for that future.
I think it's good to do some mistakes. I think the importance is to recognize that and then not to do very big mistake. So a masterclass and the university is the right time to still do meaningful mistakes. And I think Qatar is a strong investment in education, but there's also mobility, there's also technology, and it's a hub. So I was pleased to hear many speakers talk about my city, Torino, which is now a very small city, but the heritage still survives. And new things happen also in Torino. I see a similarity. So we have art very present. Maybe because the luxury then was transformed into investment into art. So there's a connection between the cultures. And I think I'm looking forward to understand what our students are able to do, because we're asking them a big challenge to think of mobility when they're usually doing interior design. And we tend to sectorize knowledge and to say, you just specialize into that. And today we try to define luxury, the future luxury, which is very broad. And to me, luxury is that is learning, is education. And I think that to be privileged, to be able to make mistakes without consequences for a while.
For a while.
So also for us, I think we'll make some mistakes, but we have the topic of the 4 lessons and we are exploring. The reason for this video is to make Marcello Gandini willing to travel one time, even if through digital media, through other means, but to understand what would change in his concept of design by experiencing something about Qatar. I'm sure Marcia will bring back memories, and that will lead into something we are not expecting yet. But stay tuned, and we'll share, hopefully. Thank you very much.
No, thanks, Sonny. And your father, it was interesting when we initially had conversations about inviting him to come and speak here, but aside from all the logistics of the flying and getting a sort of tickets and etc., one thing I put forward at the start was, maybe we could talk about some of his iconic designs and from historic models. Absolutely not interested, just interested in the future, and I found that really incredible. I was embarrassed to say, oh God, well, I should have known that, because he is a future-facing man.
Absolutely. This is, I think this has been his landmark from the very beginning. He's always been interested in what's next. But it's not just a thing he says. This is something really true, because the fact is that he's always been involved into doing what he wanted, which is very good and very rare for a designer, because he was lucky enough to live in an era, and also with some sort of circumstances, Bertone and all these people that made his project possible. He was creating so much and so many projects that when one was finished, he would just put it aside and think at the other and the next one.
Mm-hmm.
When you ask him, as I said, about the past, the only answer you get is the people and the souvenirs of the people. So there's nothing that interests him much about the past. He's always, now, I mean, he's 85, and his way of thinking is way more modern than my way of thinking. Because it's incredible. When I talk to him and we speak, he always has new ideas, a vision that I couldn't even imagine to think about. And when you put a problem in front of him, he comes up with solutions that I would absolutely not imagine, which means that at 85, he continues to have forward thinking and to think about what's not done. As he said in the message, his only goal is to think about things that are new because they're interesting and because they solve problems, because he's very much of a, let's say, practical designer. He's never been just into aesthetics. His interest is into the whole object, whether it's a car or a house or a watch. So his interest is just in doing something new, which is his mission, probably.
Mm-hmm. Kindy, can I ask you a little bit? I know that it's early stages, but I'm very interested in. We're seeing some incredible architecture in Doha. Obviously, this building we sit in is a very good example, and then you've got the IMP building, the Museum of Islamic Art, another incredible building. Can you tell us a little bit about the architecture of the Auto Museum and how it might encourage this kind of almost think tank kind of future-looking these ideas?
Yeah, definitely. So the Qatar Auto Museum will be hosted in an existing building, which is the old exhibition center of Doha.
Mm-hmm.
It's an amazing building that has, I would say, a golden location in the city. So it's on a highway next to a metro station and between two big parks in the city next to Qatar village. So this building is going to be repurposed by a design that is being developed by Rem Koolhaas and AMO, his team. So we are very glad to be working with Rem. I think all the revolutionary ideas that he always brings into all fields of design, not just architecture, would fit perfectly for the Qatar Auto Museum. And we will be turning this building into a new landmark of the city. So this is about the design of the museum. We are still at the early stage of design, so we are going to progress, hopefully next year, finalize the design for the museum. But as I mentioned, the area that will be dedicated for, like, let's say, museum-y spaces for display, we expect them to be just a third of the building.
Right.
The two other thirds will be dedicated for science, technology, for ideas related to car design. So the museum will not just be about the past. The future will have a much bigger space, I would say, in the museum.
Wonderful. Just moving on to a little bit more prosaic, but I don't know, perhaps interesting. I was at the motor show, and I noticed that the Ministry of Transport had a little stand there, so which I was very, very curious about. So I spoke to some of the people on the stand there, and I think this is a really interesting proposition for this part of the world, the idea of public transport and how you encourage, perhaps through design, encourage a sort of take-up of public transport when it's not necessarily seen as the go-to for local people. And I wondered how you may see that design sort of feeding into these quite ambitious plans. I mean, I've seen possibly the biggest array of solar panels above a bus stop that I've in the world. But maybe, Simona, this will be one for you, because the crucial thing about this is going to be the interior. How are you going to make it, palatable to a generation?
To probably define what interior is, because when we design interior, we consider a box. And actually, Marcello Gandini explains that well when he used the metaphor of the ship in the bottle.
Mm-hmm.
So when you have to build the interior once the shell is designed. This non-cooperation between maybe engineers, and designers. And in architecture, we have architects, we have urban designer, architects, and then interior designer. And it's a specialized culture. So in Qatar, you see that the interior is extended to very far away from your home. So you take the metro is a fantastic space, and it's all a continuous refrigerated space. Today, maybe too much here.
I think they did turn it up, actually, because we had a few complaints.
But I think that's the point. The comfort of refrigeration is not only the body, the feeling of the body, the senses. It's the symbolic value. So we know that a very cold climate means luxury. And it's actually not an intellectual luxury because it's bad for the planet. So it's a snake biting its tail. So what we're trying to teach our students, and through this masterclass, something is what they experience directly, and something is in context. We talked about the differences of luxury in different cultures, the different of shapes, of colors. Sometimes it's related from traditions that are very detached from reality. We think of nomadism. I'm quite new to Qatar, so sorry. I've been here 1 year. I was in Korea for 20 years. So to see this difference in culture is very interesting. It's always refreshing. So the interior, to me, it means now this room, but then it means Qatar for the moment. But then I extended, include Italy, then include Korea. And our students are also very diverse. So we get a nuance which is different. So you asked me about the city and about the transportation. But to me, I extended to the cultural input that we receive. So it is a network and very complex formula. We are all using AI now, our students are using AI, but I think the difficulty is exactly what we're looking for, the direction. Because the output is a conversation between a machine and ideas. So we're learning how to direct this thing. It's directing traffic of data, and now it's more about many ideas that have to come together. But yeah, I think it's an ongoing process, so we'll see where it goes.
A work in progress. Kindy, do you have thoughts there, or before we turn it over to the audience?
For the public transportation point of view, I think the museum has a role to play in the future to, as I mentioned, like we see encouraging new forms of mobility as one of our responsibilities, and this is not only through such collaborations. We hope the future museum will also have section about that, and we will be focusing even on safety and all, let's say, issues that currently exist in the country. So we will be focusing on young generation, how to resolve those issues. I think we are making very good steps toward like developing the public transportation here. We still have a lot to do, but we are progressing.
Wonderful, thank you, Kindy. So, audience question time once more. Who has a question for the panel? Gentleman in the front here.
Hello, thank you for the amazing panel. I have a question for Mr. Simon. This master class is open for the public or exclusive for the VCU students?
I think we start as a test run with our students. We'll be the guinea pig for the operation. But I think the museum intention is to open it up, not only to the general audience within Qatar, but to the world. Because we know Marcello Gandini is a treasure that the Qatar Auto Museum is sharing with the world.
Yeah, I can add that one of the reasons why he said yes to this project is also to pass a message onto younger generations. He has a great deal of experience, a great deal of projects he made, and of course those are contents and things that are there. And one of the things he wishes also to younger generation is, as he said, the will to study, to know what's the history of car design. Because sometimes when you go to design schools and you talk to students, they have incredible visions for the future, but they don't know that maybe this thing they're imagining has already been done 50 years ago because they didn't study the history of design. So one of the goals for Mr. Gandini with this masterclass is also to communicate and to pass a message of his experience, of course, but also on how it's a good idea to know the past for not repeating it and inventing something new.
This is actually an important point because when we started first talking about the project, I was very keen to have this project available for everyone. And this is why I was telling Simone that the museum is interested in preserving this global automotive heritage. Mr. Gandini have global knowledge and we want to have this masterclass as a gift from the Qatar Auto Museum to the automotive world. So anyone in the world would be soon able to listen to this knowledge, learn from it, and hopefully use it for like the benefit of everyone.
Wonderful. Yeah. Any other questions? Chap there. Is that Aziz? Yes. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you. This is a great discussion. I'm a car designer and also educator. I do teach car design and product design, all that stuff. I know the importance of actually doing or learning by actually physically being there, kind of seeing how things are working and just kind of failing and just kind of building up on that. How would that be to kind of be taking these master classes? Are they going to be like some... is it going to be virtual, or can you give us some idea of like what would be the approach? Because it sounds very exciting.
Yeah, you know, you're familiar with the format of the masterclass. They're like videos. So you're correct. Videos are documentaries. They're like one-way communications. But we're planning to organize a workshop. So we start at VCU Art. And we start with studios or dedicated seminar, like short workshop that have a theme that is inspired. So inspired by the theme of the lecture. So they are like a guideline. So you're going to have somebody in the middle that is just like for the car design, the person who's making the model. It could be model-based, it could be 3D graphics. But we are working on that depending on the inspiration we get from each theme. So we have an outline, but you're correct. One thing that we see with specific in space design is that we build a lot of simulations, but we lose the ability to go around the space. Marcello Gandini talks about the vehicle that is moving and that you have to move around it, but when it moves itself, it's not so much the speed, but it's the movement. So it's a perception that computers simulate. And already in VCU Art, we have many labs, a physical lab. So there's a lot of makers, and so this is a trend that is coming back. That is parallel to this digital, we heard about the story about too much digital content, too many screens. So this is something we're exploring, but definitely we're going to have models.
Gentleman in the front here.
Hi, Mohammed Naeem here from Driver. A question that's very different on a personal note to Marzia. Having a father like Marcello Gandini, did you by any chance have any inclination towards motorsport or cars? And because you're doing something very different, so is that something? Did you have anywhere where you were into design or you were into cars as well?
No, I was lucky enough not to have this passion for design because I think that it would be very difficult to be in the business. I know some sons and daughters of big designers that are maybe struggling to find an identity. I've never felt any sort of competition, luckily, or will to follow my father's path in terms of doing the same thing that he does. I'm in communication. I've been working in the field of design, car design and design in general for many years. It's a different point of view. And it's nice, though, to have a background in this sense, because it gave me a huge culture, I hope. Let's say, never suffered the idea of having to reach his achievements. And there's one thing I have to say about my father. He made the choice, as I said before, not to have a big company because he wanted to do what he wanted to do and not having to accept projects that he didn't want to do because they weren't good enough. Well, let's say, of course, he had to compromise himself sometimes, that's for sure. But the reason why he didn't want to do all this was also because he wanted to live his life, spend time with his family, enjoy his passions, flying and going downhill like a crazy guy. That's why he has this back pain today. So I think I was very lucky to have him as a father. He inspired me a lot. But I never wanted to be in his career. And I also have to say that he's very passionate about what he does, but he never owned a single car probably of the ones he designed, talking about supercars especially. And when people ask him why, and he says, well, because I own this car, they're mine. I don't need to have the actual object. So we're all very happy in this philosophical environment that we live. No need to be in some sort of a competition and try to reach the same goals for me.
Is it true that he was offered the last Countach off the line and he said no?
Well, yeah, I think so. and me and my brother are really sorry about that, because he probably could have one of each car he designed. But well, of course, it's not true, because he owned BMWs,
yeah,
Citroën, Renaults, all the normal cars. He owned this car. He bought them. He never had one from the companies. So, yeah.
Great. Thanks, Marcia. I think we're out of time, actually. I've just realised we've just run over a little bit. Thank you so much to our panellists, Simone, Marcia, and Dr. Al-Kindi. We hope you enjoyed the design for the forum. I've just got to thank Visit Qatar and obviously the guys from the Geneva Motor Show. The Geneva Motor Show will be in Geneva next year, and maybe we may see some of you there. But thank you so much for coming and your lovely questions and being a very attentive audience. And thanks, guys. Thank you.